I never thought I'd be the type of person to sit down and question whether or not I was the asshole in my own family drama. But here I am, with my stomach in knots and my head spinning, trying to put everything into words so I can make sense of it. It all started when my younger brother, Evan, announced that he was getting married. On the surface, that should have been a time for joy, excitement, and family bonding. Weddings are supposed to bring families closer, right? But in my family, nothing is ever that simple. See, Evan has always been the golden child. My parents adore him. They've coddled him his entire life, forgiven him for things they would have crucified me over, and built him up like he's some flawless, perfect son. And don't get me wrong, he's not a bad guy. He's smart, charming, charismatic, and honestly, people just naturally like him. But when you're constantly compared to someone who seems like they can do no wrong, it eats away at you. I've always been the one who had to fight for scraps of approval. Growing up, I was the one who got grounded for bad grades while Evan was just tired from sports. I was the one lectured about being responsible, while Evan was praised for just being young and making mistakes. It got to the point where I stopped even trying to compete for their affection. I carved my own path, distanced myself emotionally, and focused on building a life where I didn't have to constantly prove my worth. But Evan's wedding pulled me back into that dynamic. The first sign of trouble came when my mom called me, gushing about how excited she was. "It's going to be the wedding of the year," she said. "Everyone's going to be there. Family, friends, the entire community practically. Oh, and Evan wants you to be his best man." I froze. Best man? Me? On the surface, it sounded like a huge honor. But I knew Evan. He didn't ask me because he wanted me to stand beside him on the biggest day of his life. He asked because it looked good. It would make my parents happy, complete the picture-perfect family image they always wanted to present. He didn't care about my feelings. He just wanted to check a box. Still, I agreed. What was I supposed to do? Say no and be the bitter older brother who ruined his wedding? I figured I could suck it up, do my duty, and get through it. That was mistake number one. As the planning unfolded, the favoritism became unbearable. My parents were completely wrapped up in Evan and his fiancée, Julia. Every conversation, every family dinner, every phone call was about the wedding. I might as well not have existed. When it came time to plan the bachelor party, Evan basically told me what to do instead of asking. He wanted something extravagant, something that would impress his friends, many of whom were rich, snobby guys from his college fraternity. I tried suggesting a more intimate, meaningful trip with just close friends, but he shot that down immediately. "No, man, we need something big. Vegas, bon tout de suite, bottle service, the works." I couldn't afford that, and he knew it. But instead of offering to cover the cost or compromise, he just shrugged and said, "Figure it out. You're the best man." That phrase, "you're the best man," started to feel less like an honor and more like a weapon. Every time I pushed back, that's what he'd say, as if accepting the role meant signing away my right to have boundaries. By the time the wedding weekend rolled around, I was exhausted. I'd spent weeks dealing with his demands, my parents' passive-aggressive comments about how I should be grateful to play such an important role, and Julia's subtle jabs about how I better not mess up the speech. And that's when everything came crashing down. When I left off, I had just confronted my wife in the kitchen with the pregnancy test I found hidden in her drawer. That single plastic stick felt heavier in my hand than anything I had ever carried in my life. It was proof of a secret, a truth that had been lurking in the shadows of our marriage. And now I had no choice but to face it. She froze when she saw it. Her face went pale, and her lips trembled, like she had rehearsed 100 possible conversations with me, but not this one. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then whispered, "It's not what you think." That phrase. God, I hated those words instantly. How many times had I heard that in movies, in shows where the cheater gets caught red-handed? And yet here, she was the woman I had built my life around, saying those exact same lines. I couldn't even speak at first. I just stood there with the test in my hand, my pulse roaring in my ears, my breath shallow. My chest felt like it was caving in, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't just angry, I was terrified. Terrified of what her next words would confirm. I finally managed to choke out, then explain it. Make me believe something else. Because right now, it looks exactly like what I think it is. Her eyes welled up. She shook her head, muttering, "I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you." And there it was. The confirmation. She didn't even need to say the words I cheated. The way she avoided my gaze. The way her voice cracked. The way her entire body seemed to fold in on itself like a guilty child. Every single thing screamed it louder than anything she could have admitted outright. But still, I asked because some masochistic part of me needed the words. "Is it mine?" She gasped like I had slapped her. "Of course it could be yours," she said, her voice rising defensively, but then softening almost instantly. "But I can't be 100% sure." That was it. My knees nearly gave out. I had to grab the back of a chair to steady myself. That was the moment I felt my entire world tilt on its axis. The certainty I had about my life, about us, about the family we were supposed to build together, it all disintegrated in an instant. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to run out the door and never look back. But instead, I just whispered it. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the floor, twisting her fingers together so tightly they were turning white. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft I almost missed it. "Ethan." The name hit me like a physical blow. My best friend. My brother in everything but blood. The guy who had stood beside me in my wedding. Who had cried with me when my father passed away. Who had helped me move into this very house. Ethan. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process it. Like, no, that can't be right. Maybe I misheard. But then I saw the guilt written all over her face, and I knew I hadn't misheard a damn thing. I dropped the test onto the table. It clattered loudly against the wood, and that sound seemed to echo in the silence between us. "You slept with Ethan," I said, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She covered her mouth with her hands and sobbed. That was all the answer I needed. I wish I could describe the exact feeling of betrayal in that moment, but the truth is, it was too big to put into words. It wasn't just that she had cheated. It wasn't just that she might be carrying his child. It was that she had destroyed two of my most important relationships in one go. My marriage and my friendship. My wife and my best friend. Both gone just like that. I paced around the kitchen, my thoughts spinning out of control. My voice finally broke through my anger. "How long?" "6 months," she whispered, not even looking at me. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of looking me in the eye every day and pretending nothing was wrong. Half a year of sleeping in my bed, kissing me goodnight, acting like we were building a future together while sneaking around with him. I laughed then. A hollow, broken laugh that scared even me. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. She reached for me, like she wanted to touch my arm, to calm me down, but I stepped back so fast she froze. I couldn't stand the idea of her skin touching mine. Not then. Maybe not ever again. I asked her 100 questions that night. Where did it happen? How many times? Did you ever think about me? Did you ever feel guilty? Was it worth it? She cried through most of it, giving me half answers, excuses, sometimes just silence. Every word she spoke just dug the knife deeper. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I ended up in my car in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I didn't even start the engine. I just sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. Because here's the thing, I didn't just lose her that night. I lost him too. Ethan was like family to me. And now, he was the enemy. The rage that built in me thinking about him was almost worse than what I felt toward her. He knew better. He knew what she meant to me, what we were building, and he still chose to cross that line. That betrayal burned hotter than fire. I didn't sleep that night. I don't even know if I blinked. By the time the sun came up, I had made one decision. I had to confront him. Not tomorrow. Not next week. That day, I texted him, "We need to talk. Now." He replied almost instantly. "Sure, man, what's up?" I wanted to throw my phone across the car. The audacity of that response. The casualness. Like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't hiding the darkest secret I had ever uncovered in my life. I didn't text back. I just drove straight to his apartment. The drive, there was a blur. I couldn't tell you what streets I took or how many red lights I hit. All I know is that by the time I pulled into the parking lot, my hand was shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the ignition. When he opened the door, he looked genuinely happy to see me. That, more than anything, almost made me snap right there. "Hey man, early for you to be up?" "Huh," he said, grinning. I just stared at him. My mouth was dry, my chest tight. Then I finally said the words I never thought I'd have to say. "I know." His smile dropped instantly. His face went blank. And in that silence, I knew he understood exactly what I meant. The weeks following that explosive family dinner were a strange mixture of silence and tension. Silence, because my father and brother seemed to retreat into themselves, like two men who'd realized they'd crossed a line but didn't know how to step back. Tension, because every time we were in the same room, the air felt heavy, like static before a thunderstorm. I thought things would calm down with time, but instead, the weight of unspoken words only grew heavier. My brother, Mark, stopped calling me entirely. My father would send the occasional text, a stiff, "Hope you're well," or "Did you get the paperwork I mailed?" But there was no warmth, no acknowledgement of the wounds still gaping between us. And then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under my door in one of those manila envelopes that always seemed to carry either bad news or bureaucratic nonsense. For some reason, my hand shook before I even opened it. Inside was a letter from my father, handwritten, which was unusual because he'd always preferred the efficiency of email or typed notes. His penmanship was neat, but there was an unevenness to it, like his hand had trembled while he wrote. The letter wasn't an apology, at least not in the way I'd hoped. Instead, it was a justification. He wrote about how family unity was the cornerstone of survival, and how me stepping out of line threatened that unity. He said I'd embarrassed him in front of Mark, and that by refusing to understand the bigger picture, I was showing the same selfish streak my mother had always carried. That line hit me like a punch. My mother, who had raised me, nurtured me, stood by me through everything. My mother, who my father had treated like a shadow, like someone who should never step into the light. He used her as a weapon against me. I folded the letter and shoved it in a drawer, but the words burned into my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past in my mind. All the small, sharp moments I'd buried came rushing back. Like the time I'd been accepted into a state-level debate competition. I was 15, glowing with pride, but my father said, "Don't get cocky. You're not your brother." Or the time Mark crashed his car after sneaking out, and somehow I was grounded too because siblings share responsibility. Or the countless dinners where my achievements were brushed aside, while Mark's half-hearted attempts at anything were celebrated like Olympic victories. I had lived in my brother's shadow for so long that even now, as an adult, I felt like I was suffocating under it. And now my father wanted me to apologize for stepping into the light, even for a moment. I thought about ignoring the letter, pretending it hadn't arrived. But the anger bubbling inside me demanded release. So I sat down at my desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and wrote back. Unlike his, my letter wasn't neat. My handwriting looked almost frantic. I told him everything. How his favoritism had crushed me. How his constant comparisons had made me doubt myself at every turn. How I was done carrying the guilt for wanting to live my own life. I didn't write it to convince him. I knew he wouldn't change. I wrote it for myself, for closure. When I sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mailbox the next morning, I felt lighter. But that feeling didn't last, because 2 days later, I got a call from Mark. His voice was cold, almost clinical. "You didn't have to drag Dad like that," he said. I blinked in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I read your letter." I froze. "What? How?" He showed me. Of course he did. My father couldn't face me alone. He needed his golden boy at his side like always. "You don't understand what you've done," Mark said, his tone dripping with superiority. "You've basically declared war on this family." "I didn't declare anything," I snapped. "I just told the truth." "Truth?" he scoffed. "The truth is, you've always been jealous. You've always hated that Dad respected me more, that I could handle things you couldn't. And now you're throwing a tantrum because you want attention." Something in me broke. "Mark," I said quietly, but my voice trembled with rage, "I have spent my entire life being second to you. I have watched Dad excuse your failures and minimize my successes. I have watched him bend over backwards to protect you, while I had to fight for every scrap of acknowledgement. Don't you dare stand there and tell me this is about jealousy. This is about survival. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a second, I thought I'd gotten through to him. But then he said, his voice low and venomous, "You're pathetic." And then he hung up. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about my father. It was about Mark too. The favoritism hadn't just shaped me. It had shaped him as well. He had grown up believing he was untouchable, that he deserved everything handed to him. And now, as adults, he couldn't see me as anything but an enemy trying to steal what he thought was rightfully his. After that call, things escalated quickly. Suddenly, my father stopped sending even those stiff, obligatory texts. My brother blocked me on social media, at family gatherings, which I stopped attending. My cousins would send me whispers afterward, saying my name had been dragged through the mud, that my father had painted me as ungrateful and disrespectful. It was like they were erasing me, slowly, deliberately, cutting me out of the family narrative. But here's the strange thing. Instead of destroying me, it gave me clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth of my family dynamic without any illusions. My father wasn't going to change. My brother wasn't going to see reason. And I wasn't going to keep setting myself on fire just to keep them warm. Still, part of me grieved, because no matter how toxic it had been, they were my family. And losing them felt like losing a piece of myself. That grief festered quietly until something happened that dragged everything back into the open. Something I didn't expect. One evening, while I was cooking dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my aunt, my father's sister. It said, "I think you should know what's going on. Call me." I hesitated, my stomach tightening, but I dialed. When she picked up, her voice was sharp, urgent. "Your father's rewriting the will, and you're not in it." My grip on the phone tightened. "What?" I whispered. "He's leaving everything to Mark. Everything. The house, the investments, even your grandmother's jewelry. And he's telling people it's because you've separated yourself from the family." The words hit me like a hammer. I wasn't just being erased emotionally. I was being erased legally, financially, historically. "He wants to punish you," my aunt continued. "This isn't about money. It's about control. He wants to make sure you know where you stand." I sank into a chair, my mind spinning. For a long time, I convinced myself I could walk away clean, that cutting ties would give me peace. But now, I realized my father wasn't going to let me leave quietly. He wanted to crush me, to make me regret ever standing up for myself. And the worst part, Mark was standing right there with him, holding the hammer. That night, as I lay awake, one question kept looping in my mind. How do you fight a family that wants to erase you? And more importantly, if I fought back, would that make me the asshole? When I walked back into the house that night, after the dinner with Emma, my chest felt like it was carrying both bricks and feathers at the same time. Bricks because the guilt weighed heavy on me. Feathers because for the first time in months, I felt light, like something was shifting. I leaned against the closed front door and just listened to the silence, to the sound of my own breathing, to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My wife wasn't home yet. She had taken an extra shift at the hospital, and honestly, that was a relief. I needed the quiet. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table, the one my wife bought at some overpriced home decor boutique, and just stood there staring at the wall like it was going to give me answers. It didn't. Instead, my mind kept replaying Emma's voice over and over. "You're not crazy, you know. You're not imagining the way she dismisses you. That's not love. That's control." That hit me harder than I expected. For years, I've told myself that marriage means compromise, sacrifice, and a certain amount of swallowing your pride. But hearing Emma say it out loud, that maybe what I had been putting up with wasn't normal, that shook me. I wandered into the kitchen, grabbed a beer, and sat down at the dining table. The same one that had seen countless arguments about bills, about work schedules, about why I wasn't ambitious enough. I took a sip and stared at the chair across from me, the one my wife usually sat in. I tried to picture her smiling at me, laughing with me, the way she used to when we first started dating. But the image wouldn't come. All I could see was her pursed lips, her raised eyebrow, the way she spoke to me like I was some subordinate who had failed to meet expectations. I stayed like that for nearly an hour, just lost in thought. Then I heard the front door slam. She walked in, tossed her purse onto the couch, and kicked off her shoes. No greeting, no smile, no "hey, how was your day?" Just the sound of her sighing dramatically as she looked at the dishes I hadn't finished. "Really?" she snapped. "You couldn't do one simple thing while I was at work?" I opened my mouth to say something but stopped. For years, I had defended myself, explained myself, argued my case like a lawyer begging the jury. Tonight, though, I just stayed quiet. I wanted to see what happened if I didn't rise to the bait. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, so now you don't even have the energy to defend yourself?" she sneered. Pathetic. I swallowed, took another sip of beer, and stayed quiet. She stormed off to the bedroom without another word, the sound of the door slamming, echoing down the hall. And for the first time, I didn't feel crushed. I didn't feel like I needed to chase after her, apologize, or prove my worth. Instead, I sat there, staring at the wood grain of the table, and realized something. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe I wasn't crazy. The following days were tense. My wife seemed to notice that something in me had shifted. I wasn't as reactive. I wasn't as desperate to please her. I went about my day calmly, almost detached, and that seemed to unsettle her more than anything. On Wednesday, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. "What's going on with you lately?" she demanded. "Nothing," I said evenly, pouring sugar into the mug. "Don't give me that. You've been different. Quiet. What is it? Are you hiding something?" That question hit me like a sucker punch because, yes, technically I was. I hadn't told her about Emma. I hadn't told her about how often we'd been talking. And even though nothing physical had happened, the conversations alone felt like something I couldn't explain away. "I'm just tired," I said finally. She studied me, her eyes narrowing like she could peel back my skin and read the truth inside me. "You'd better not be lying to me," she said coldly, and then walked away. That night, I lay awake in bed beside her while she scrolled on her phone, and all I could think about was Emma's laugh. The way it bubbled out of her so naturally, so unforced. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed like that with my wife. By Friday, Emma and I had fallen into a routine of long late-night calls. We never said anything outright, never crossed that invisible line, but the emotional intimacy between us was undeniable. She asked me about my dreams, my childhood, the kind of man I wanted to be. My wife hadn't asked me questions like that in years. That Friday night, I sat in my car outside Emma's apartment building, engine idling, heart pounding. I hadn't planned to be there. I'd just gone for a drive to clear my head, and somehow ended up in front of her place. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "You okay?" I typed back. "Outside." Seconds later, she appeared in the doorway, wearing an oversized hoodie and sweatpants, her hair messy, her face bare. And yet, she looked more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. She climbed into the passenger seat, and for a moment we just sat there in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. "I shouldn't be here," I said finally. "Then why are you?" she asked softly. I turned to look at her, and in that moment, I knew the answer. Because she made me feel seen. Because with her, I wasn't invisible. Because she looked at me like I mattered. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice shaking. Emma reached over, her fingers brushing mine. It was the smallest touch, but it sent a shock through my entire body. I closed my eyes, fighting the war raging inside me. "I'm married," I said, my voice cracking. "I know," she replied. "That's why we're just sitting here." We sat in silence for another half hour, hands almost touching but never quite closing the gap. Then she finally whispered, "You deserve to be happy, you know." Her words broke me. I wanted to believe them, but years of being told otherwise had left scars I wasn't sure could heal. When I finally drove away that night, I didn't kiss her. I didn't cross that line. But in some ways, what happened was worse. Because emotionally, I was already standing on the other side. The weeks that followed were a blur of guilt, longing, and confusion. I went through the motions at home, nodding when my wife spoke, doing chores, playing the part. But inside, I was unraveling. Emma's voice was in my head constantly, reminding me that maybe I wasn't the problem. One night, my wife caught me staring off into space at the dinner table. "What are you thinking about?" she asked suspiciously. I snapped back to reality, forced a smile, and lied. "Work stuff." She studied me again with that sharp gaze. "You're lying," she said. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because she was right. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, and realized I was standing at a crossroads. One road meant staying, continuing this endless cycle of belittlement and control. The other meant tearing my life apart, risking everything, and maybe, just maybe, finding happiness. For the first time in years, I didn't know which road I was going to choose. I don't think I've ever experienced such a cocktail of emotions in my entire life as I did the night after everything exploded. My body was running on pure adrenaline, my thoughts racing like a freight train without brakes. I kept replaying everything: my brother's face when I confronted him, my father's silence, my mother's tears, and the way the entire house felt like it was suffocating me. You know that feeling when you know the world you've always trusted is cracked open? Like the foundation you thought was solid turns out to be sand? That was me, standing there, realizing my family wasn't the family I thought it was. And worse, realizing maybe I wasn't the person I thought I was either. After the fight, I left. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I didn't take much with me, just my wallet, a jacket, and my phone. I ended up driving aimlessly for hours, past streetlights that blurred into one another, past neighborhoods I didn't recognize. The whole time I kept thinking, how the hell do I move forward from this? How do I forgive? How do I forget? By midnight, I found myself parked at the edge of an overlook, staring at the city lights below. It should have been peaceful, but inside me there was nothing but chaos. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Missed calls from my mom, texts from my cousin, even a voicemail from my dad asking me to come home so we can talk. But I couldn't. Not yet. And here's where the twist comes in. The part that really made me question if I was the asshole or just a broken person trapped in a broken family. The next morning, I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I needed space, distance, quiet. I thought if I isolated myself, I'd finally be able to sort through the storm in my head. But the silence was worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the fight, my brother's clenched jaw, the way he looked at me like I was some sort of traitor for daring to call him out. 3 days went by like that. 3 days of eating barely anything, of staring at the ceiling and asking myself, was I wrong to blow it up like that? Was I the asshole for not letting it slide? My dad certainly thought so. In the few conversations we had, he made it clear he wanted me to get over it and stop dividing the family. He told me I was selfish, dramatic, even cruel for putting my mom through more stress. But here's the thing. My mom secretly texted me every night, telling me she loved me, that she was proud of me for standing my ground, even if it hurt. She admitted that she'd always known something wasn't right, but was too scared to face it. Her words kept me afloat when the guilt threatened to drown me. By the end of that week, I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. So I made a choice that scared the hell out of me, but also felt like the only way forward. I called my dad and told him I wasn't coming back to live in that house. At first, he exploded. He called me ungrateful, reckless, accused me of abandoning the family. He even threatened to cut me off financially if I went through with it. I let him rant, and then I said the words I'd been too afraid to say before. Dad, you don't get to call me selfish when you're the one who's been protecting him all this time. You chose silence. I won't. There was a long pause on the line before he hung up. That was the last real conversation we had for months. Life after leaving wasn't easy. I crashed on my cousin's couch for a while. I picked up extra shifts at work, scraped by to afford a small one-bedroom apartment. But you know what? For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from the lies, from the fake smiles, from the pressure to pretend everything was fine. And here's where it gets complicated. My brother reached out. It was about 2 months later. I came home from work one night, and there was an envelope slipped under my door. No name on it, just my name written in handwriting I recognized instantly. Inside was a letter, pages of his handwriting, messy and smudged in places, like he'd been crying while writing it. He admitted everything: the manipulation, the cheating, the lies. He said he didn't know why he did it, only that he was terrified of losing control if he didn't. He said he hated himself for hurting me, for hurting everyone. And then came the part that broke me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I never hated you. I envied you because you had the courage to be honest when I couldn't. I sat there in my tiny apartment, reading that letter over and over, tears blurring the words. My whole body shook. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to reject the apology. But another part, the part that still remembered us as kids, playing in the backyard before everything got complicated, wanted to believe he could change. Forgiveness isn't simple. It's not a switch you flip or a word you say once. It's a process, a decision you make again and again, even when the pain is still raw. So I wrote him back. I told him I wasn't ready to see him yet, but I appreciated his honesty. I told him if he wanted to rebuild, it had to start with him getting help, therapy, real change, not just words on paper. And to my surprise, he agreed. Over the next few months, we started talking again. Slowly, carefully, like walking across thin ice. Some days I hated him. Some days I felt hope. It was messy, but it was real. And as for my dad, he stayed distant. My mom visited me when she could, and she cried every time she hugged me, whispering that she was sorry for not protecting me sooner. I don't know if I'll ever fully repair things with my father, but maybe that's okay. Maybe some relationships aren't meant to be perfect. Now, almost a year later, here's where I stand. I don't have all the answers. I don't know if forgiving my brother makes me strong or stupid. I don't know if cutting ties with my dad makes me selfish or brave. But I do know this. I refuse to stay silent. I refuse to keep pretending. And for that, I can finally look at myself in the mirror without flinching. So, am I the asshole for blowing up my family? For refusing to stay quiet? Maybe to some people I am. But for me, for my peace, my sanity, I know I did what I had to do. And if you've ever been in a place like this, where loyalty and truth collide, maybe you'll understand. Maybe you'll see that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let the old version of your family burn, even if it leaves scars. That's where my story ends, or maybe where it begins. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. It means more than you know. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. You'll never miss the next one, and you'll be part of this journey with me. Your support truly keeps me going. When I left off, I just told you how the tension in my house had grown unbearable, like walking on a minefield where even breathing too loudly could trigger an explosion. That's the backdrop I carried into the following weeks, and let me tell you, it only got messier from there. See, people think drama in families happens all at once, like one big blow-up fight you can pinpoint as the moment everything shattered. But in my experience, it's the little cracks, the unspoken jabs, the passive-aggressive, "oh, I didn't mean it that way" comments that slowly erode any chance of peace. And that's exactly what was happening in my house. It started with meals. My mom would cook dinner, and if my dad wasn't home yet, she'd set aside a plate for him. Totally normal, right? Except when he came home, if the food was a little cold, he'd mutter something about a hot meal not being too much to ask. And my mom, who used to laugh things off, would stop smiling. Her silence was heavy, a silence that said, "I heard that, and I'm keeping score." I would sit there, fork in hand, staring at my plate, pretending I was completely fascinated by the peas rolling around so I wouldn't have to meet either of their eyes. My sister, who was younger and way less subtle, would sometimes sigh really loudly, like a theatrical stage actor trying to get the audience's attention. I'd shoot her a look that basically said, "For the love of God, don't make this worse." But she never listened. One night, she flat out said it. "Why do you always act like Mom doesn't do enough for you? She's literally the only reason this house even runs." The table went quiet. Forks stopped moving. My dad's head slowly turned toward her, and I swear the way his eyes narrowed could have cut through glass. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said in that low voice that meant he was pissed but trying to sound calm. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," she shot back. "You treat her like she's your maid. And honestly, it's gross." I could feel the blood drain from my face. My sister had just stepped into the fire, and now it was spreading. "Enough," my mom finally said. But the way she said it wasn't sharp, it wasn't angry. It was tired. Bone-deep tired. Like she didn't even have the energy to argue anymore. That's what scared me the most. Not the yelling, not the bickering, but the absence of fight in her voice. After that, dinner became a quiet ritual where words were weapons and everyone was scared to draw first blood. But the worst part? I started noticing little alliances forming. My mom and sister would huddle in the kitchen, whispering, their voices too low to make out, but their tone heavy enough to know they weren't talking about the weather. My dad, on the other hand, started inviting me to help out in the garage. At first, I thought maybe he just wanted company, but it became obvious real quick that he was using me as a sounding board. "She doesn't appreciate how much I work," he'd say, wiping grease off his hands, never meeting my eyes. "This house, those bills, the car she drives, all of it comes from me busting my ass every day." I nod, because what was I supposed to say? Disagree with him? Defend my mom? No matter what I chose, I'd end up the bad guy. So I stayed neutral. Or at least, I tried to. But neutrality doesn't last long in a war. Because then came a night that everything tipped over. It was a Friday evening, and my dad had come home later than usual. He was already tense, slamming his keys down harder than necessary, sighing like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. My mom asked, gently, if he wanted to eat. And instead of just saying yes or no, he snapped. "Would it kill you to have something ready once in a while? I work all day, and I can't even sit down to a damn plate of food without begging for it." The silence after that sentence was sharp enough to slice through bone. My mom's hand froze halfway between the sink and the counter. My sister's jaw dropped. I felt my chest tighten, like I was holding my breath underwater. And then my mom turned around, slowly, and her face was unreadable. Not angry, not sad, just blank. "You know what?" she said quietly. "I'm done." The words were so soft, but they hit like a gunshot. "Done with what?" my dad asked, though his tone had shifted, like maybe he knew the answer but was praying she didn't mean it. "Done with this. With you acting like I'm worthless. With you making me feel like a burden instead of your partner. I'm not doing it anymore." I swear the air in the room changed. The sound of my sister's fork clattering against her plate echoed like it was in a cathedral. My dad looked like someone had just sucker punched him. And me? I sat there, staring at the table, thinking, holy shit, this is it. This is the beginning of the end. But it didn't stop there. My mom didn't just drop the line and leave. No, she kept going, and for the first time in my life, I heard her lay everything out. Every little slight, every comment, every time she had swallowed her pride just to keep the peace. And my dad? He just stood there listening, his face a mix of anger, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite place, fear maybe. By the time she was done, the room felt like a bomb had gone off, except instead of debris, all that was left was raw truth scattered everywhere. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing the muffled sounds of them arguing downstairs. My sister came into my room at one point, her eyes wide. "Do you think they're gonna, split?" she whispered. I didn't answer, because deep down I knew the truth. Something had shifted, and we weren't going back to the way things were. And here's the kicker. The next morning, when I came downstairs, they were sitting at the kitchen table together. No yelling, no cold silence. Just sitting, talking, like two people trying to stitch together a piece of fabric that had already torn too far down the middle. But the thing about torn fabric? Even if you stitch it up, the scar never really disappears. When I pulled up to Mom's house that Sunday afternoon, the air felt heavier than usual, like even the summer heat had turned judgmental. Her neighborhood was filled with the sound of kids playing in sprinklers and distant lawnmowers, but all of it seemed muffled under the weight in my chest. I hadn't told her yet about the confrontation with Lily. I knew I needed to, but I wasn't sure how to put words to something that felt like betrayal twisted with grief. Mom was already waiting at the door, her cardigan wrapped around her thin frame, even though it was nearly 80 degrees outside. She'd lost weight since Dad passed, and though she tried to hide it, her hands shook a little more each time I saw her. "There you are," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten." "I wouldn't forget," I replied, leaning in to hug her. She smelled faintly of lavender, the way she always had, but there was something else too, stale coffee and the faint sourness of someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. Inside, the house felt the same, but emptier. Dad's recliner sat untouched in the corner, the dent in the cushion permanently holding his shape. His glasses still rested on the side table, exactly where he'd left them the night before his heart attack. Mom refused to move them. I followed her into the kitchen, where she'd laid out a small lunch: sandwiches, chips, and iced tea. It looked like she'd tried, but the bread was unevenly cut, and the tea was far too diluted. Dad had always been the cook. So, Mom said after we sat down, "How's Lily doing? I haven't seen her since the service." The question stabbed deeper than I expected. I swallowed hard, trying not to let my emotions show. "She's fine, I guess." Mom tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. She had that look like she could see straight through me, the same one she'd used when I tried to lie about sneaking out as a teenager. "Something's wrong. Tell me." I sighed, setting down my sandwich. "We had a fight. She said some things about Dad that I can't get past." "What kind of things?" The words stuck in my throat. Saying them out loud felt like it would make them more real. Finally, I forced it out. She accused him of treating me differently, of favoring me. She said he never showed her the same love. Mom's face paled, her sandwich frozen halfway to her mouth. She set it down and clasped her hands together. "Oh dear." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Oh dear, that's it." She basically said Dad was a bad father. Mom's eyes watered. She shook her head slowly. "No, not bad. That's not what she meant. Lily has always been sensitive. You know that. That doesn't excuse what she said, especially not now. Dad's barely gone, and she's already rewriting history." Mom was quiet for a long moment. The clock on the wall ticked, filling the silence. Finally, she spoke. "Your father, he tried. He tried so hard with her. But they were different people. He didn't always know how to reach her the way he did with you." I blinked, stunned. "So you're saying she's right? That he did treat us differently?" Mom looked down at her hands. "Not on purpose. He adored you both. But with you, it was easy. You liked the things he liked. You understood him. With Lily, he stumbled. He didn't mean to, but yes, sometimes it looked like favoritism." The room tilted for a second, like the ground had shifted beneath me. I'd always believed Dad had been perfect, at least in the ways that mattered. To hear otherwise felt like someone had cracked open the foundation of my entire childhood. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I whispered. "Because it wasn't your burden to carry. You had your own relationship with him, and it was beautiful. I didn't want to taint that with the struggles he had with Lily." I pushed back from the table, pacing the kitchen. "So now what? I'm supposed to just accept that Dad wasn't who I thought he was? That he hurt her without even realizing it?" Mom's eyes brimmed with tears. "Sweetheart, people are complicated. Your father loved fiercely, but he wasn't perfect. None of us are. That doesn't erase what he gave you, or her. But maybe it explains why Lily's hurting so much now." I ran my hands through my hair, feeling my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to cling to the image of Dad as flawless, the man who could do no wrong. But another part of me, the part that remembered Lily crying in her room after another fight with him about her bad attitude, couldn't ignore the possibility that she wasn't exaggerating. "Do you think she hates me?" I asked quietly. Mom shook her head firmly. "No. She's angry, yes. She's grieving in her own way. But hate? No. She's your sister. Deep down, she loves you more than she knows how to say." I wasn't so sure. We finished lunch in heavy silence. Every bite tasted like cardboard, my appetite gone. When it was time to leave, Mom hugged me tight, whispering, "Don't give up on her. Please." On the drive home, I replayed everything in my head. Lily's words, Mom's confession, Dad's smile and my memories, colliding with the possibility that it hadn't been the same for Lily. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining all the moments Dad had taken me fishing, to baseball games, to late-night ice cream runs. And then I imagined Lily at home, left behind, feeling invisible. The guilt gnawed at me. For the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was the asshole for not seeing it sooner. When I pulled into my driveway that evening, the entire neighborhood looked different to me. Nothing had changed physically, of course. The same trimmed hedges, the same rows of mailboxes, the same familiar porch lights flickering on as dusk crept in. But my perspective had shifted in ways I couldn't quite explain. For years, I had thought of this street as a safe haven, a predictable cocoon where families live their quiet lives, waving politely while mowing lawns or collecting the morning paper. But after everything that had unraveled with my sister, my fiancé, and my family's tangled loyalties, the ordinary suddenly felt sinister. Like every window concealed whispers, every curtain hid judgment, every nod from a neighbor carried unspoken knowledge of my humiliation. I sat in my car for a good 15 minutes before finally stepping out. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. I walked slowly toward my front door, keys jangling nervously in my hand, half expecting some fresh disaster to ambush me the second I turned the lock. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee grounds and dust. My jacket still hung on the hook where I'd left it yesterday morning, back when I thought I had a stable future and people I could trust. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag by the couch, and collapsed into the silence. But it wasn't real silence. My head replayed everything. The accusation from my fiancée that I had abandoned her when I refused to smooth things over, my mother's voice begging me to forgive my sister because family is family, and worst of all, the betrayal itself. My sister sneaking behind my back with the one person I trusted enough to marry. I poured myself a drink I didn't need, sat in the dim living room, and let the ice melt while I stared at the blank TV screen. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. "Son, we need to talk. Can I come by tonight?" I stared at the words, thumb hovering over the keyboard, torn between rage and exhaustion. I hadn't spoken more than a few words to him since the confrontation, because I knew deep down he wasn't neutral. He had always protected my sister, no matter how recklessly she behaved. And now, when her choices had burned my life down, I doubted he would suddenly switch sides. Still, a part of me needed to hear what he had to say. So I typed back, "Fine." 8 p.m. When he arrived, the air between us felt heavy, almost brittle. He carried that cautious dad smile he always used when he wanted to soften a hard conversation, but it only irritated me more. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the faint hum of the fridge filling the silence. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Look, son," he began, folding his hands like he was preparing for a sermon. "I know you feel betrayed. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But there's always a but, isn't there?" I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "But she's still your sister. And your fiancée, well, ex-fiancée. She made mistakes, yes, but people do stupid things under pressure. That doesn't erase all the good years you had together." I laughed bitterly, slamming my glass down. "Pressure? Dad, they lied to me. They sneaked around behind my back. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? How can you sit there and act like this was just some stupid mistake?" His eyes hardened, his tone shifting into something sterner. "Because I refuse to let this family tear itself apart over one night of bad judgment." One night. I snapped. "You think this was just one night? You think betrayal like this just happens randomly?" "No, Dad. This was planned. This was intentional. They chose to humiliate me." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And what do you plan to do, huh? Cut your sister out forever? Refuse to speak to her until the day you die? Life's too short for that kind of bitterness. Maybe bitterness is all I have left." I shouted, the words echoing louder than I meant them to. My chest heaved, and I realized my hands were trembling. The room went silent, only my ragged breathing breaking the stillness. Dad sat back, his face unreadable, his disappointment clear. "You've changed," he said finally, shaking his head. "This anger, this coldness, it's not you." I stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "You don't get to decide who I am, Dad. They did this. They made me this way." He rose slowly, as if the weight of the world pressed on his shoulders. At the door, he paused, turning back one last time. "Son, one day, you'll regret pushing us all away." Then he left, the door closing with a soft finality that felt louder than any slam. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the house, replaying his words, every syllable burrowing deeper into my chest. Was I pushing everyone away? Or were they pushing me, forcing me to choose between my dignity and their version of family unity? By dawn, exhaustion finally pulled me onto the couch, but my dreams were fractured. I saw my sister smirk, my ex-fiancé's eyes filled with crocodile tears, my parents' pleading faces. Every time I woke, I felt more drained, more lost, more certain that I was standing at the edge of something irreversible. And deep down, I knew the next time I faced them, something would break completely. When I walked back into that house, I swear I could feel the walls closing in on me. Every memory, every argument, every quiet dinner where the silence weighed heavier than words, it all came flooding back. My parents were already sitting in the living room, almost as if they had been waiting for me to return. My mom's face softened when she saw me, but my dad's eyes remained guarded, a fortress behind which his disappointment lived. I sat down across from them, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of the silence. It wasn't suffocating me anymore. It was mine. I was controlling it. And when I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, not the trembling, pleading tone I'd grown used to whenever they confronted me. "I know what I want," I said. My mom blinked, her hands tightening around the mug she was holding. My dad leaned back in a chair, his jaw tightening the way it always did when he thought he was about to be challenged. "I don't want to keep living in this cycle," I continued. "The blame, the guilt, the way every single thing I do is picked apart. I'm done being the child you mold to fit your vision. I'm an adult, and I'm choosing my own life." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We only wanted what was best for you." I nodded, not with agreement, but with acknowledgement. "I know you believe that, but what you think is best for me has been killing me slowly for years. It's not love when it feels like punishment. It's not guidance when it feels like control. And it's not family when it feels like I'm always the enemy." My dad shifted forward, his voice sharp. "So what? You're just going to walk away? Throw away everything we gave you?" I met his stare head on, something I never used to be able to do. "I'm not throwing it away. I'm setting it down. I'm allowed to choose peace over tradition, self-respect over fear, and love over obligation. If you can't accept that, then yes, I'll walk away." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in that house. It stretched on, heavy and fragile, like glass about to shatter. My mom's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. My dad looked furious, but even he didn't push further. For the first time, I realized they weren't as powerful as I thought. The power had always been mine. They had just convinced me otherwise. I stood up, and my legs didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. My chest didn't tighten with the fear of being disowned or rejected. Instead, I felt light, lighter than I had in years. I walked to the door, turned back once, and said, "If you ever want to know me for who I really am, not who you expect me to be, you'll know where to find me." Then I left. And here's the thing, when I closed that door behind me, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. Weeks later, I expected the guilt to come rushing in after I left that night. I expected sleepless nights, the kind where your mind replays every possible outcome, wondering if you just burned the only bridge you had. But instead, I slept better than I had in years. Every morning, I woke up in my small apartment, sunlight streaming through the blinds, and I felt peace. Not happiness, not euphoria, just peace. And peace is worth more than approval. I started building a life that was mine. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned years ago because my dad said they were pointless. I started cooking for myself, creating meals that didn't have to live up to anyone's standards but mine. I reconnected with friends I had pulled away from because family drama had drained me. I started journaling, and with every page, I untangled pieces of myself I didn't even realize were knotted. But the real test came when my phone rang one evening. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity and a tiny sliver of hope made me press accept. Her voice was shaky. Mom. There was a pause, long enough that I could hear her breathing, like she was steadying herself. "Your father doesn't agree with me calling." But I couldn't stay quiet. I've been thinking about what you said, about how love shouldn't feel like punishment. And I realized you're right. I didn't see it before, but I do now. My throat tightened, emotions swirling so fast, I didn't know which one would spill out first. "I'm not asking you to forgive everything," she continued. "I know we've hurt you, but I don't want to lose you. I want to try again, on your terms." Tears blurred my vision. For so long, I had begged for this, not just words, but recognition. And here it was. Not perfect, not complete, but real. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. And for the first time, I believe we might actually rebuild something. Not the same as before, not forced or conditional, but something honest. Reflection. Here's what I've learned. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is walk away from the people who raised you. It feels unnatural, like ripping out your own roots. But sometimes it's the only way to grow. You can love your family and still refuse to let them hurt you. You can honor where you came from without being chained to it. And you can forgive without forgetting, without going back to being someone else's puppet. I'm not saying it's easy. I still have days where I question if I did the right thing. But then I remind myself, every time I said yes to them, I was saying no to myself. And for the first time, I'm finally saying yes to me. And if you've been here, if you felt that same battle inside you, know this. Choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you free. Because at the end of the day, peace is worth more than approval. If you felt this story, make sure to subscribe. It's the best way to keep these powerful stories coming your way. Don't miss the next one, because it might be the story you need to hear most. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to write something like this. I'm usually the type who tries to deal with things on my own, burying the drama, keeping it inside. But now, with my wedding only 3 months away, everything has been turned upside down. The one day that's supposed to be about love, celebration, and happiness has suddenly been overshadowed by years of old wounds ripping open again. Let me start with some context. My name's Emily. I'm 27, and I'm engaged to the most incredible man I've ever known. His name is Ryan, and we've been together for almost 6 years. He's been with me through some of the hardest moments in my life. When I think about the person who knows me best, every scar, every insecurity, every dark corner of my past, it's him. That's why I didn't think wedding planning would be complicated. Stressful, sure, but not complicated. But then my father decided to reappear in my life. See, my dad, Mark, left my mom and me when I was 10. To put it bluntly, he walked out one night and never looked back. There wasn't a long goodbye. There wasn't an explanation I could understand at that age. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. My mom did her best to hold everything together, and I'll always admire her for that. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She made sure I never went hungry, and she was at every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher meeting, even if she had to rush straight from a shift smelling like fries and cleaning solution. For years, I told myself that my dad must have had a reason, that maybe someday he'd call, explain everything, and I'd finally understand. But he never did. He started another family, had 2 more kids, and I only ever heard about them through the grapevine. No birthday cards, no Christmas calls, not even a text when I graduated college. Fast forward to now. As soon as I got engaged, word somehow got back to him. And suddenly, after 17 years of silence, he wants back in. Not just in my life, but in my wedding. The first message came in the form of a Facebook DM. I hadn't seen his name in years, and when I did, my stomach dropped. I almost didn't open it. Part of me wanted to delete it and pretend it never came, but curiosity won. Hi Emily, it's your dad. I heard you're getting married. I'd really love to be part of your big day. I've made mistakes in the past, but I want to make things right. Please let me walk you down the aisle. It would mean everything to me. I read that message about 100 times. Walk me down the aisle? The man who left me crying on the porch as a kid, who couldn't be bothered to check in for nearly 2 decades, now wanted the honor of giving me away to my husband? I didn't reply, but then the call started. He must have got my number from some relative, because he left me voicemails too. At first, they were calm and almost rehearsed, like he'd been practicing what to say. Emily, sweetheart, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, let's talk. You're still my little girl. That last part made me furious. His little girl? I stopped being his little girl the second he walked out. Ryan was supportive through all of it. He told me I didn't owe my dad anything, that this was our wedding and we could decide exactly how it went. But then the rest of my family started chiming in. My aunt said I'd regret not giving my dad a chance to make amends. My grandmother said, no matter what, he's still your father. Even my mom, who has every reason to despise him, told me, honey, it's your day. Don't let anyone pressure you either way. Still, the pressure is there. It's building every day. When my dad showed up uninvited to my bridal shower last week, that's when I finally snapped. He didn't call, didn't ask. He just walked in with this smug smile, holding a gift bag like everything was normal. All the air left the room. My friends froze. My mom looked like she'd seen a ghost, and I felt my throat close up. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. I told him he shouldn't be there. He looked hurt, but then he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I just want to walk my daughter down the aisle." Is that too much to ask? Now half my relatives think I'm being cold and unforgiving. I've heard whispers that I'll regret this forever. Some even said Ryan should encourage reconciliation for the sake of peace. But Ryan's on my side. He keeps telling me, you don't owe him a role in your life just because he shares your DNA. So here I am, 3 months before my wedding, being called heartless for not letting a man who abandoned me take part in one of the most intimate moments of my life. Am I really the asshole for not wanting my father to walk me down the aisle? When I left off, I was caught between two worlds. The family I was born into, who had a long history of manipulation, guilt-tripping, and passive-aggressive cruelty, and the fragile, chosen family I was trying to build with my girlfriend, Emily, who had already warned me that my tolerance for my parents' behavior was tearing us apart. The week after that explosive Sunday dinner, my phone became a weapon. My mom called me 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening, each time with a new script and new angle. "Sweetheart, I just don't understand why you're punishing us." That was her opener on Monday. By Tuesday, it turned into, "Your father hasn't slept since Sunday. His blood pressure's up. Do you really want in the hospital because of your attitude?" By Wednesday, it was full-blown nuclear guilt. "If you keep this up, don't be surprised if one day you come to the house and find us gone." We're not getting any younger. Regret is a heavy thing to carry. It was relentless. Every ring of the phone felt like a hook digging into me. And the worst part? A piece of me still wanted to pick up and soothe her, to smooth everything over like I've been trained to do since I was a kid. But Emily, she wasn't letting me cave this time. She'd been silent through most of the week, which worried me more than her yelling would have. Normally, she'd vent about my mom, rant about my dad, lay down her boundaries. But instead, she just withdrew. One night, I came home from work to find her sitting on the couch with her laptop open, but her eyes weren't on the screen. They were fixed on nothing, her face slack in that numb way people get when they're too exhausted to even cry. Ing. I set my bag down carefully, like noise itself might shatter her. She blinked slowly, turned her head, and said, "Do you even hear yourself when you talk to them?" That question gutted me. I tried to defend myself. "What do you mean?" I tried to stay calm. No, she cut me off. Her voice wasn't raised, but it was sharp like glass. "You go right back into that obedient little boy mode. The second your mom sighs, you fold. The second your dad frowns, you backpedal. And then what? You bring all that poison back here, and I'm the one who has to mop up the emotional mess." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. She sighed, rubbed her forehead, and whispered, "I can't build a life with someone who doesn't know where his family ends and he begins." That night, we slept in the same bed, but might as well have been on different planets. Her back was turned to me, her breaths deep and deliberate, like she wanted me to know she was done talking. I stared at the ceiling, counting every crack, every shadow, wondering if I was about to lose her. The next few days blurred together. Work felt like static, just background noise to the chaos in my head. Every email I answered, every Zoom meeting I sat through, I wasn't really there. I was replaying conversations with my parents, with Emily, trying to find the exact moment I lost control of my own life. Friday night was the breaking point. We were supposed to have dinner with Emily's best friend, Rachel, and her husband. A double date. Something normal couples do all the time. But as I was tying my shoes, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Again. Emily saw the caller ID. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she muttered, "Don't." I froze, my phone buzzing in my hand like a live grenade. Then it buzzed again, and again. 6 calls in a row. Finally, I picked up. "Big mistake. Where have you been?" Mom's voice was sharp, trembling with manufactured panic. "I've been calling all day. We thought something happened to you. You know how worried we get when you don't answer." "Mom, I'm Busse. I told you I had plans tonight. Plans that don't involve your family? Plans that keep you away from the people who gave you everything? Is that what this girl is doing to you? Is she turning you against us?" That word, "this girl," snapped something in Emily. She ripped the phone out of my hand and said into the receiver, her voice calm but cold, He's not your little boy anymore. He's a grown man. And if you don't stop treating him like your property, you're going to lose him completely." Then she hung up. Silence. I stood there, staring at her, my heart thudding like a drum. Emily looked me dead in the eye and said, "You need to decide, them or us. I'm not going to keep fighting ghosts every time we try to live our life." Her words sat between us all through dinner with Rachel and her husband. They laughed, they told stories, they asked about wedding plans, and Emily smiled and nodded in all the right places. But under the table, her hand never reached for mine. The next morning, my dad showed up at our apartment. No warning, no call, just a knock on the door. And when I opened it, there he was, stiff back, jaw clenched, eyes full of that cold disappointment that had haunted me my whole childhood. "Can we talk?" he said, already stepping inside. Emily disappeared into the bedroom without a word. Dad stood in the living room, looking around like he was inspecting the place for flaws. He didn't sit down. He didn't smile. He just crossed his arms and said, "Your mother is devastated. She thinks she's losing you. And frankly, I don't recognize the son I raised. This defiance, this disrespect, it's not you." I swallowed hard. "Dad, I'm not trying to disrespect anyone. You're just what? Choosing her over us? Letting some woman control you? You think family is disposable now." His words hit me like blows. And the worst part? A part of me believed him. I heard my own voice, weak, almost childlike. "I just want peace." Dad's lip curled, then stopped creating conflict. With that, he left. No who, no oublier. Just that dagger of a sentence lodged in my chest. That afternoon, Emily emerged from the bedroom, her face pale but resolute. "I can't keep doing this," she said softly. "I love you. I want a future with you. But if that future means dragging your parents into every fight, every holiday, every moment of our lives, then I can't. I need to know you're choosing me. Completely. No more half measures." My throat closed. The choice she was asking me to make wasn't between love and family. It was between freedom and a lifetime of chains. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to pick freedom. I couldn't get the words out of my head. "You'll regret this. Don't come crying when she ruins your life." They echoed through me like some curse I've been forced to carry. No matter what I tried to do, whether it was focusing at work, making dinner, or just lying in bed at night, they were there, like he had planted them in me, waiting to grow into something that would choke me out. And maybe that's exactly what they were doing. Because no matter how hard I tried to keep things normal, I couldn't shake the paranoia. I kept looking for signs, little cracks in the picture-perfect image I'd painted of Emily and me. And the worst part? I found them. Or at least I thought I did. The first one came a few nights later. Emily was on her phone, scrolling through something while we were watching TV. Normally, she's pretty open. She'll laugh at a TikTok, show me a meme, or even read some random article out loud. But that night, she tilted her phone just slightly away from me. Subtle. Almost nothing. But my brain exploded. Why did she do that? Was she hiding something? Was she texting him? My chest went tight. My stomach twisted. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that it was just my ex's poison running through my bloodstream. But once you notice something like that, you can't unsee it. I asked her casually, "What's so funny?" She smiled, but it looked a little delayed. "Just a meme." Then she locked her phone and set it face down on the couch cushion. And I swear to God, my heart dropped into my stomach. Face down. Locked. Away from me. It was probably nothing. A coincidence. But the seed had already been planted. The second sign came a week later. Emily had said she was going out with her friend Sarah for drinks. Totally normal. She even texted me pictures. Her and Sarah clinking glasses, smiling at the bar. But when she came home, something felt off. She wasn't drunk, exactly, but she wasn't fully sober either. A little too giggly, a little too loose. And her perfume smelled stronger, fresher, like she'd reapplied it before she came inside. I kissed her, and there it was, something faint, something I couldn't place. Not her lip gloss, not alcohol, just different. My ex's words burned in my ears again. Don't come crying when she ruins your life. The third sign was the worst. I found a receipt in her car. Dinner for two. Steakhouse. Expensive. Only problem? The night on the receipt was one she had told me she was working late. I sat there in the passenger seat of her car, just staring at it. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I tried to tell myself a story. Maybe it was with a client. Maybe she grabbed dinner with a coworker. Maybe she had forgotten to mention it. But the steakhouse wasn't anywhere near her office. And that's when the paranoia transformed into something heavier. Not just suspicion, fear. I started noticing everything. The way she smiled at her phone sometimes, then locked it quickly. The way she avoided eye contact when I asked her about work. The way she seemed more distant in bed. Not cold, but distracted. And every time, I wanted to confront her. I wanted to say, "Who were you really with that night? Why did you hide that text? Why did you smell different when you came home?" But I couldn't, because if I asked, if I pushed too hard, and she actually was cheating, that would mean my ex was right. That would mean I had ignored every warning sign and walked straight into the fire. And I wasn't ready to hear that. One night, I snapped. We were lying in bed, and she was scrolling again. Phone tilted away, fingers tapping fast. I leaned over without thinking, trying to catch a glimpse. She immediately angled the screen farther. "Who are you texting?" I asked. She looked at me like I'd just accused her of murder. "Sarah. Sarah at midnight." "Yes, Sarah at midnight." "Why? Do I need your permission now?" Her voice was sharp, cutting. I felt my face heat up, my chest tight. "You've been secretive lately," I said, trying to sound calm, but failing. "You're on your phone all the time. You're going out more. You had dinner the other night, and you didn't even tell me." She sat up, eyes blazing. "Dinner? You mean when I grabbed food with Alex from work? The client I told you about? That's what you're talking about." I froze. My mind went blank. She was throwing out answers so fast, so confidently, that I couldn't keep up. "Why didn't you mention it then?" I asked weakly. "Because I didn't think I needed to give you a play-by-play of every single meal I eat." Her words sliced me open. And the worst part, she had a point. I lay there after she turned her back to me, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe she really was just tired of me breathing down her neck. Maybe I had let my ex get in my head so badly that I was inventing problems where none existed. But what if I wasn't? What if she was lying straight to my face? And if she was, what the hell was I supposed to do about it? Because if she was really cheating, if she was really everything my ex had warned me about, then that meant one thing. I had ruined everything. Not because of what she did, but because I had ignored every single sign until it was too late. And that thought alone was enough to keep me wide awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever know the truth. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I found something that nearly broke me. Her phone buzzed on the counter while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't touch it, but this time, I couldn't resist. The notification preview read, "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect." My blood ran cold. It wasn't from Sarah. It wasn't from her mom. It wasn't even from a name I recognized. It was just a number. No contacts saved. No explanation. Just that one text. And my entire world flipped upside down. I didn't know what to do. My hand shook so hard, I almost dropped her phone. My brain screamed at me. Take a screenshot, forward it, do something. But before I could, the water turned off in the bathroom. I panicked and put the phone back exactly where I found it. My heart hammered as she came out, towel wrapped around her, smiling like nothing had happened. "Hey, you okay? You look pale," she said, drying her hair. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, just tired." And I felt sick because all I could think was, am I living with a liar? Am I sleeping next to someone who's betraying me every single night? Or am I just losing my mind completely? I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that text. Every time I tried to breathe, I heard my ex's voice. "She's going to ruin you. And when she does, don't come crying to me." The paranoia wasn't paranoia anymore. It was reality. Or at least, it felt like it. And I realized something terrifying. If I didn't figure out the truth soon, it wouldn't matter whether Emily was innocent or guilty. Because either way, I was going to lose her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that text. Every time I tried to breathe, I heard my ex's voice. "She's going to ruin you. And when she does, don't come crying to me." The paranoia wasn't paranoia anymore. It was reality. Or at least, it felt like it. And I realized something terrifying. If I didn't figure out the truth soon, It wouldn't matter whether Emily was innocent or guilty, because either way, I was going to lose her. I spent the next morning lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every single word from the night before in my head. I had barely slept. My heart still felt heavy, like I had swallowed a stone. The glow of my phone sat dimly on the nightstand, buzzing with notifications I didn't want to check. Every time I thought about grabbing it, I imagined another message from my brother, from my parents, or even from one of our mutual friends telling me I was making a mess of things. But the real kicker? I didn't feel like I was wrong. I felt betrayed. You'd think that after all these years of being the dependable one, the sibling who kept things balanced, who sacrificed without complaint, I would have at least earned the courtesy of being asked before decisions about my life were made. Instead, my brother bulldozed through like always, making choices that suited him while dumping the consequences in my lap. Still, part of me wondered, was I being too harsh? Was I so blinded by anger that I couldn't see reason? The thought kept gnawing at me. I rolled over, finally unlocking my phone. Dozens of texts flooded my screen. Mom, honey, don't let this drive a wedge between you two. Dad, we're family. At the end of the day, that's what matters. Brother, we'll talk later. You're blowing this out of proportion. That last one lit a fire in me. Blowing this out of proportion? It was like he couldn't see past his own self-centered bubble. My chest tightened as I typed back, my thumbs trembling with a mix of rage and adrenaline. You made a decision that directly impacts my life without even consulting me. If you can't understand why that's a problem, maybe you don't know me at all. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The thing about words is, once they're out, you can't pull them back. And even though I meant every one of them, a strange hollowness filled me afterward, like I had just carved something out of myself and handed it away. I got up and went to the kitchen. My apartment felt smaller than usual, suffocating almost. I poured myself coffee, but it tasted bitter and metallic, like my own mood had ruined it. That's when my best friend, Daniel, called. Daniel had been around since high school, the kind of friend who had seen me at my worst and still stuck around. He never sugarcoated things either, which was exactly what I needed. Dude, what the hell happened? He asked the second I answered. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. He made this huge decision, one that completely screws up plans we've been working toward for months. And he didn't even tell me until it was already done. I'm supposed to just smile and accept it. Daniel whistled low. That sounds like your brother. He's always been like that, hasn't he? Jump first, think later. Exactly. And now I'm the bad guy for not just falling in line. There was a pause on the line, the kind that felt heavy with meaning. Then Daniel said, Look, I get why you're pissed. You have every right to be. But you've got to decide, are you more interested in proving you're right or in making this relationship work long term? That hit me hard. I hadn't thought of it like that. Because deep down, I didn't want to lose my brother. We'd been through too much together. The late night talks when our parents were fighting, the inside jokes no one else would ever get, the silent solidarity when things went to hell in the family. We were supposed to be a team. But being a team didn't mean he got to treat me like a pawn on his chessboard. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Every time I tried to distract myself with work or chores, my mind wandered back to the argument. By evening, I knew I couldn't sit in silence anymore. I had to talk to him face to face. So I texted, We need to talk. Tonight. In person. He replied almost instantly. Ou, fine. Come over. That one word, fine, carried so much weight. It wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't an apology. It was defiance. When I arrived at his place, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. He opened the door, his jaw set, his eyes hard. No hug, no smile, just tension. We sat down in his living room, both of us leaning forward like we were about to square off in a boxing match. All right, he said, crossing his arms. Let's hear it. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. You made a huge choice that affects me, without giving me so much as a heads up. Do you understand why that's a problem? He rolled his eyes. I didn't think it would be this big of a deal. You're overreacting. That word again. Overreacting. The dam broke. Overreacting? You're acting like my life, my time, my sacrifices don't mean anything. Like I'm just supposed to bend whenever you decide something. I'm sick of it. I've always been the one who compromises, who picks up the slack, who make sure you don't fall on your face. And this is the thanks I get. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt flicker across his face. But then he shook his head. You make it sound like I've been using you. That's not fair, isn't it? I shot back. Look at the pattern. Look at how many times I've put my life on hold because of you. And now, when I finally draw a line, suddenly I'm the asshole. He leaned back, his expression hardening. So what? You want me to grovel? Beg for forgiveness? I made a decision that was best for me. Sorry if that doesn't fit into your perfect little plan. That stung, because he was right about one thing. I did have a plan. And maybe I'd been holding on to it too tightly, expecting him to fall in line the way he always did when we were younger. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I said quietly, I don't need you to grovel. I just need you to respect me enough to treat me like an equal. Like my life matters as much as yours. For once, he didn't have a snappy comeback. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. The conversation that followed was messy, full of half-started apologies, defensive retorts, and raw emotion. We went in circles, sometimes yelling, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes almost laughing at how absurd it had gotten. But underneath it all was a thread of something real. Two brothers who loved each other but had no idea how to navigate the weight of adulthood together. By the time I left, nothing was fully resolved. But something had shifted. The walls weren't down yet, but they were cracked. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. I thought once I cut my mom off, things would quiet down. I thought I could finally start living my own life, free from her constant manipulation, guilt trips, and drama. But of course, that wasn't how it worked. The thing about toxic people is they don't just leave when you set a boundary. They test it, they push it, and they look for cracks until they find one they can pry open. My mom was no different. At first, she tried the silent treatment. Weeks went by where I didn't hear a single word from her. For most people, that would have been peaceful. For me, it was unsettling. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. And sure enough, it did. It started with little things. Random texts like, "You'll regret this," or "Family is forever. You can't erase me." Then she moved to calling my workplace, pretending to be concerned about my mental health, trying to paint me as unstable. HR had to sit me down and ask if I was okay, and that was humiliating. I explained the situation, and thankfully, my boss was understanding. But still, the damage was there. She had inserted herself into my life even after I'd worked so hard to push her out. The real kicker, though, came when she found out I was engaged. She wasn't invited to the wedding, obviously. My fiancé had seen firsthand what she put me through, and he was my biggest supporter in going no contact. But somehow my mom found out through some extended family member who couldn't keep their mouth shut. And once she knew, she made it her personal mission to destroy what was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. It started with phone calls to my fiancé. She would call him over and over, sometimes at work, sometimes late at night. She'd say things like, "You don't know who you're marrying," or "She's a liar, she's manipulative, she's just like me." It shook him, but only for a little while. He blocked her on everything, and he told me he wasn't going anywhere. But her words still stung. Then she tried showing up in person. Once, we walked out of a restaurant and found her waiting near our car. She didn't scream, she didn't cause a scene. She just stood there, smiling in this eerie way, and said, "You can't hide from me forever." It was enough to rattle me for days. I had to get a restraining order. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who needed to file something like that against my own mother, but I had no choice. The stress was eating me alive, and I was terrified she'd show up on our wedding day. And even with the restraining order, she tried. She sent people in her place, relatives who thought they were doing her a favor by reasoning with me. Some cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly popped up, begging me to forgive her, to let her come, saying things like, "She's still your mother. You'll regret it if she's not there." It was all manipulation, recycled through different mouths. I held firm. She didn't get invited. She didn't get a single detail about the wedding. And on the day itself, everything went smoothly. For once, I felt like I was truly free, standing there with the man I loved, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. It should have ended there. But of course it didn't. After the wedding, I thought she'd give up. But instead, she escalated again. She started spreading rumors to my family, to old friends, even to people from my childhood church. She told them I was an ungrateful daughter, that I had abandoned her after all she sacrificed for me. She twisted every story, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. Some people believed her, others didn't, but the damage was done. The worst part was when she somehow got access to pictures from the wedding. Someone must have sent them to her, and she posted them online, writing captions like, "I wasn't invited to my own daughter's wedding." She thinks she's better than me. This is what betrayal looks like. Seeing my happiest moments turned into ammunition for her pity campaign broke something inside me. I wanted to scream, to fight back, to tell everyone exactly what she had done to me over the years. But a part of me knew it wouldn't matter. People who wanted to believe her would believe her, no matter what I said. And people who knew me, who truly knew me, didn't need an explanation. So I made the hardest decision I've ever made. I stopped defending myself. I stopped looking at what she posted. I stopped engaging with anyone who tried to drag me back into her drama. And for the first time, I realized what true freedom meant. It wasn't silence from her. It wasn't getting her to admit she was wrong, because that would never happen. It was me choosing not to let her words control me anymore. It was me deciding that my life wasn't hers to narrate, that I didn't owe her access just because she gave birth to me. It took years of therapy, countless breakdowns, and more tears than I can count. But now, I finally see it clearly. Sometimes, cutting off family isn't cruel. Sometimes, it's the only way to survive. And maybe people will always see me as the asshole for it. But if being the asshole means protecting my peace, protecting my marriage, and building a future without constant chaos, then I'll wear that title proudly. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not living for her. I'm living for me. If this story touched you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Every story here is written to keep you hooked from start to finish, and you won't want to miss what comes next. My story is complicated, and if I'm being honest, it's something I've gone back and forth on for months. I keep replaying different versions of it in my head, trying to decide if I'm being cruel, selfish, or if maybe I'm finally standing up for myself after years of silence. The wedding is in 6 months, and the pressure keeps growing heavier each day. Let me start from the beginning. I didn't grow up with a father. Technically, yes, I had one. But in reality, he disappeared when I was 7 years old. One night, he tucked me in, kissed my forehead, and promised we'd go get pancakes the next morning. That was the last time I ever saw him. My mom woke me up crying, telling me that Dad needed space and that he'd be gone for a while. I remember asking her if a while meant a week, a month, or maybe even a year. She just hugged me tighter and said she didn't know. That while turned into 15 years. Growing up, I used to sit by the window, especially on weekends, hoping I'd see his car pull up. I'd imagine him walking up the driveway, holding a teddy bear or flowers, or even just smiling like nothing had happened. But the driveway stayed empty, and year after year, the hope turned into something heavier, bitterness. My mom did her best. She worked 2 jobs, often coming home exhausted, but still making sure I had dinner, that my homework was done, that we had little traditions like movie nights and holiday baking. She sacrificed everything so I wouldn't feel the emptiness too much. But no matter how hard she tried, there was always a hole where my dad should have been. Birthdays were the worst. Every year I'd get a cake, candles, and my mom singing to me, but I also got silence. No call, no card, nothing from him. Even as a kid, I knew what that meant. He chose not to be part of my life. Fast forward. I'm 25 now, engaged to an amazing man named Eric. He's been my rock through everything. When he proposed, I immediately pictured my wedding day, walking down the aisle with my mom by my side. She earned that place. She's the one who raised me, who held my hand when I cried, who taught me what strength looks like. But 3 months ago, out of nowhere, my dad showed up. It started with a letter. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed, formal, like something you'd get from a stranger. He apologized for the circumstances that had kept him away, said he regretted missing out on my childhood, and that he wanted to reconnect. At first, I laughed. After 15 years, this was what he had to offer? A typed letter with generic regrets? Then he showed up at my apartment. I wasn't ready for that. I opened the door, and there he was, older, grayer, heavier, but undeniably him. He smiled like we were old friends. I froze. A part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part wanted to scream. But instead, I let him in. He started talking fast, like if he got enough words out, he could erase the past. He said he had gone through hard times, that he wasn't in the right place to be a father, that he'd always loved me, but couldn't show it back then. He wanted to make it up to me. He wanted to be at my wedding. And then, the kicker, he wanted to walk me down the aisle. I felt like I'd been punched. My mom had been preparing for this moment for years. She'd even joked about practicing her dad walk. The thought of replacing her with a man who abandoned me felt like a betrayal. When I told him no, that my mom would be walking me, he looked devastated. He said, "But I'm your father. It's tradition. People will wonder why your own dad isn't walking you." I snapped back. "People will wonder why you disappeared for 15 years. Maybe you should think about that." He left that day looking hurt, but since then, he's been relentless. He's called, texted, even showed up at my mom's house. He told relatives, and now half my extended family is pressuring me to let him have his moment. They say he's trying, that forgiveness is part of moving forward, that weddings are about family unity. But what about the years he chose not to be my family? What about the birthdays, graduations, heartbreaks, and milestones he missed? What about the nights my mom cried herself to sleep, thinking she wasn't enough for me? Now, I'm stuck in this whirlwind. I feel guilty for shutting him out, like maybe I'm the asshole for not giving him a chance. But I also feel like giving in would erase everything my mom did for me. And here's the twist. Last week I found out why he left. Not from him, but from my aunt. She told me he didn't just need space. He had another family. A whole other family he moved in with. A wife. 2 kids. That's where he was all those years, being the dad to them that he never was to me. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said, "It's true, but that's over now. I want to be your dad again." Again? He never was my dad. So here I am, 6 months away from my wedding, drowning in pressure from family, guilt from my own heart, and this gnawing voice in my head that keeps asking, am I really the asshole for refusing to let my estranged father walk me down the aisle? When I left off, I told you about the night everything seemed to split in half. The version of me who wanted to keep fighting for my marriage, and the version of me who wanted to run away from it all. But what I didn't explain yet is how those thoughts started eating me alive the very next morning. I woke up in bed alone. The sunlight was cutting through the blinds, spilling across the sheets in these sharp little lines. I reached over automatically, like I always used to do, expecting to feel my wife's warmth on the other side. But her side of the bed was cold. The pillow wasn't even dented. She hadn't come back into the room at all. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence sink in. The house was too quiet, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. It's funny how silence can be louder than yelling sometimes. Finally, I dragged myself out of bed, put on a hoodie, and walked into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table with a mug of coffee, scrolling on her phone. When she looked up, there was this moment where her eyes softened like she almost wanted to smile, but then it just disappeared. She went back to staring at the screen like I wasn't even standing there. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. She hummed in response, not even a word, just a hum. I made myself a cup of coffee too, sat down across from her, and tried again. "About last night." She cut me off before I could even get the words out. "I don't want to do this right now." Those words landed harder than any fight we'd ever had. Not now. Not ever. That's what it felt like. I could have pushed. I could have insisted we talk. But something in her face told me if I pressed even 1 inch, she would snap, and not in the way where we'd finally clear the air. It would have been the kind of snap that shatters everything completely. So I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded, and sat there drinking coffee in silence. The steam rose between us like a wall I couldn't climb. The days that followed blurred together in this weird limbo. We weren't fighting, but we weren't talking either. We were coexisting in the same space, careful not to bump into each other too hard. Every little thing became loaded with meaning. The way she closed a cabinet, the way I left my shoes by the door, the way she spent hours on her phone instead of sitting next to me on the couch. I catch myself staring at her, trying to memorize her expressions, trying to read her like a book I had once known by heart, but now couldn't make sense of. She'd notice me looking and shoot me this cold glance that made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I started overthinking everything. Was I the asshole for wanting to keep dragging this relationship into endless conversations she clearly didn't want to have? Or was she the asshole for shutting me out completely, refusing to even try? The worst part was I couldn't talk to anyone about it. My friends all thought we were fine. My family adored her and would probably blame me if they knew what was happening. And her family? Forget it. They'd never take my side. So I just kept it bottled up, letting the silence between us get heavier by the day. One night, I finally broke. I had been lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every argument we'd ever had, every smile she'd ever given me, every little piece of the puzzle that used to make sense but didn't anymore. Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed, grabbed my car keys, and just drove. No destination, no plan. I just drove around the city like maybe the streets could give me an answer. I ended up parking near the river, rolling down the windows, and listening to the water move in the dark. I thought about the beginning, how we met, how she laughed that first night we sat on the curb eating pizza at 2 a.m., how she once told me she never felt safer than when she was with me. I held on to those memories like lifelines, but they hurt more than they helped. Because if we had that once, why couldn't we find our way back to it? I must have sat there for hours, watching the sky shift from black to blue to gold. By the time the sun came up, I felt hollow, like I had poured out everything inside me and still didn't have an answer. When I came home, she was in the kitchen again, pouring cereal into a bowl. She didn't even ask where I had been, didn't look up, didn't care. That was the moment something broke inside me, not with anger, but with grief. Because if the person who once promised to love you forever doesn't even notice when you disappear for a whole night, what does that say about the love that's left? The weeks that followed were a tug of war inside my chest. Part of me wanted to confront her, demand answers, force her to tell me if she still loved me or not. But another part of me was terrified of the truth. What if she looked me in the eyes and said no? What if all of this, the silence, the distance, was her way of easing me toward the end without saying the words out loud? So I kept quiet. I tried to play normal. I made dinner. I cracked small jokes. I offered to run errands with her. She gave me polite smiles sometimes, but they were empty, like she was humoring me, like I was a guest in her life instead of her partner. And here's the thing no one tells you. Loneliness doesn't always mean being alone. Sometimes the worst loneliness is sitting 2 feet away from the person you love most in the world and realizing you can't reach them anymore. One night, after another silent dinner, I finally asked her, "Do you even want to be here anymore?" She froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. For a second, I thought she was going to explode. But instead, she set the fork down, folded her hands, and looked at me with the calmest expression I'd ever seen. "I don't know," she said. Not yes, not no, just I don't know. And that hurt more than anything, because it meant she hadn't even decided if I was worth fighting for. I went to bed that night with her words echoing in my head, and I realized something terrifying. I was holding on to someone who wasn't holding on to me back. That was the beginning of the unraveling. And the deeper it went, the more I started questioning not just her love, but myself. Was I the asshole for clinging to a marriage that clearly wasn't making her happy anymore? Or was she the asshole for giving up without even trying to fix it? The line between right and wrong blurred so badly, I couldn't even see it anymore. The weeks after the confrontation at the restaurant were a blur. I'd thought that cutting off my mom and distancing myself from my brother would bring me peace, but instead, it left a hollow kind of ache in my chest. Family ties aren't like cutting off a toxic friend. You don't just walk away without baggage. At work, I was distracted. At home, I was restless. My wife noticed, of course. She always does. One night, while we were lying in bed, she turned to me and asked softly, "Do you regret it?" Standing up to them. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before answering. "No," I said, but I keep replaying everything in my head. Like, what if I had done things differently? What if I just sucked it up like always? She rolled onto her side, placing a hand on my chest. Then nothing would have changed. They'd still walk all over you. They'd still expect you to play peacemaker, fixer, scapegoat, whatever role they need in the moment. Do you really want that for the rest of your life? I didn't. But saying goodbye to a family you've known your entire life feels like amputating a limb. You know it's killing you, but losing it doesn't come without pain. Still, I threw myself into my own little family, my wife, my daughter, and the life we were building together. We had weekends at the park, movie nights on the couch, pancakes on Saturday mornings. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't living under someone else's shadow. But that peace didn't last, because my brother, Mark, wasn't done with me. It started with texts, long paragraphs about how selfish I was, how I'd abandoned our mom, how I was tearing the family apart. He'd throw in jabs about my childhood, twisting memories into accusations. Remember when mom stayed up all night sewing your Halloween costume? You never appreciate the sacrifices she made. Or you think dad would be proud of how you treat his wife. At first, I ignored him, blocked his number, but he'd find another way. Emails, burner accounts, even a letter in my mailbox. It was like he couldn't stand the idea of me cutting off the script I'd been assigned my whole life. The letter was the worst. It wasn't even written like a plea. It was a demand, a list of conditions. I was to call mom once a week. I was to apologize for humiliating her in front of the family. I was to make up for lost time by visiting every other Sunday. And the kicker, I was to help him financially, since mom always wanted us to support each other. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the piece of paper in disbelief. My wife picked it up, skimmed it, and burst out laughing. "This sounds like a hostage negotiation," she said. "Accept you're the hostage, and the ransom is your sanity." She wasn't wrong. That night, I sat with the letter in my hands, torn between anger and heartbreak. Because as much as my brother frustrated me, part of me remembered when we were kids. Before all the favoritism, before the manipulation, before the weight of being the responsible one crushed me into silence. We used to ride bikes until the streetlights came on. We used to build blanket forts in the living room. We used to be brothers, not adversaries. So why'd it have to be this way? The answer came slowly over the next few months as patterns became clearer. Mark wasn't acting alone. Every message, every guilt trip, every attack, it all sounded like mom. Her words, her logic, her manipulations. He wasn't just my brother anymore. He was her mouthpiece. And I realized something chilling. I wasn't just cutting off my mom. I was cutting off both of them. The breaking point came in the spring. My daughter's birthday. We had balloons, cake, her friends from school, all the little joys a kid should have. She was grinning ear to ear, covered in frosting, when there was a knock at the door. I froze when I saw them standing there. My mom and Mark, uninvited, holding a giant present wrapped in shiny paper. My wife stiffened beside me. "Don't," she whispered, her voice tight. But my daughter ran past us, squealing, "Grandma." What was I supposed to do? Slam the door in her face in front of my kid? So I let them in. The room shifted instantly. The air got heavier, like all the light and laughter had been sucked out. My mom put on her sweetest smile, hugging my daughter and cooing over how much she'd grown. Mark hovered in the background, smirking like he'd just won a battle. The gift was huge, extravagant, a dollhouse that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. My daughter was thrilled, of course, but all I could see was the strings attached. And I was right, because after cake, after the kids had gone outside to play, my mom cornered me in the kitchen. "See how happy she is? That's what family is about. You can't deprive her of her grandmother just because you're bitter." I clenched my fists. This isn't about her. This is about you trying to control everything again. You don't get to buy your way back in. Her smile faltered, replaced by that familiar, icy stare. "I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By turning my granddaughter against me." Mark stepped in, crossing his arms. "You're being dramatic. Just admit you overreacted and fix this before it's too late." Something inside me snapped. "No," I said, my voice low but steady. "I'm not fixing this. Because I didn't break it. You did. Both of you." The silence that followed was deafening. For once, my mom didn't have a quick retort. For once, Mark didn't have a smug comeback. They just stared at me, like they didn't recognize who I'd become. And maybe they didn't, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. That night ended with them storming out, leaving the dollhouse behind. My daughter didn't understand why I was upset, why her grandma left so suddenly. I tucked her in a bed, kissed her forehead, and promised her she was safe. But inside, I was shaking because I knew this wasn't the end. My mom and brother weren't the type to give up. They'd be back, one way or another. And the question that kept me up at night was this: how far they go to pull me back in? When I woke up the next morning, I had that same heavy pit in my stomach I'd gone to bed with. It wasn't just about what had happened with my sister the night before, or how my mom had defended her. It was everything. The years of being brushed off, the moments I'd swallow my pride just to keep peace, the times I told myself, just let it go. Family is family. But letting it go always meant letting myself disappear. And I couldn't disappear anymore. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything settle. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text. I reached over, half hoping it was some kind of apology. It wasn't. It was my sister. Don't be dramatic. You always take things too far. We were just joking. Mom agrees. Move on. Move on. Those two words hit me harder than I expected. Because moving on meant pretending like none of it mattered. Moving on meant I was supposed to accept being the punchline in my own family. Moving on meant, once again, I just stayed quiet. But I couldn't. Not this time. I didn't reply. Instead, I got up, made coffee, and sat down with my notebook. Writing has always been how I clear my head. I wrote everything. The party, the laughter at my expense, the way my mom defended her, the way I felt standing in that kitchen with everyone staring at me like I was the problem. I wrote until my hand cramped, until I had page after page of anger, confusion, sadness, and, if I was being honest, betrayal. Because that's what it felt like. Betrayal. By noon, I was emotionally drained. I closed the notebook and stared out the window. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my cousin, one of the few people who hadn't joined in the laughter last night. Hey, you good? I saw what happened. That was messed up. Those words made something loosen inside of me. Because for the first time, I realized it wasn't just me who thought it was wrong. I texted back, thanks. I don't know what to do. It's like they don't care how much it hurts. She replied almost immediately, because they don't have to live with it. They don't know what it's like to always be the target. You got to set boundaries, or it'll never stop. Boundaries. The word rolled around in my head all afternoon. I never had boundaries with my family. Family, I'd always thought, wasn't supposed to need them. But the truth was, if family refused to respect me, then I needed them more than ever. Later that night, I called my mom. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might actually hang up, but I didn't. Hey Mom, I started. She sounded cheerful, like nothing had happened. Hi, honey. Feeling better? No, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Actually, I'm not. I need to talk about last night. Her tone shifted immediately, defensive. Oh, come on. You're not still upset, are you? It was just a little fun. You know your sister didn't mean anything by it. I gripped the phone tighter. It wasn't fun for me. It never is. Every time, Mom. It's always me. And you let it happen. You even defend her when she does it. There was silence on the other end. Then she sighed. You're too sensitive. That's always been your problem. And that right there, it broke something in me. Do you even hear yourself? I snapped. I'm telling you I'm hurt. And instead of caring, you're telling me it's my fault for being sensitive? Do you realize how cruel that is? Her voice hardened. Don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. No, I said, my voice shaking, but not from fear, this time from years of swallowed anger, finally spilling over. You're supposed to be my mother. But last night, you were her shield, not mine. Do you know how that feels? To have your own mom take sides against you. She didn't answer. I pushed forward. I'm done. I'm done being the joke. I'm done being brushed off. If you and my sister can't treat me with basic respect, then I don't need to be around either of you. I love you, but I love myself too. And I can't keep sacrificing my self-worth just so you too can laugh. The silence stretched. Then quietly she said, so what are you saying? I'm saying I need space. I'm saying I can't keep pretending this family dynamic is okay when it's destroying me. If that means we don't talk for a while, then so be it. Her voice cracked. You'd really cut us off over this? No, I said firmly. You're choosing this. If you can't respect me, if you can't support me when I tell you I'm hurting, then you're the one cutting me off. I hung up before she could reply. And the second I did, I burst into tears. Not because I regretted it, but because it hurt. Setting boundaries hurts. Choosing yourself hurts. But staying in a place where you're constantly disrespected, that hurts even more. That night, I cried myself to sleep. But for the first time in years, the tears weren't just from being broken down. They were from finally standing up. The days following the confrontation with Ethan and Rachel were like living in a fog. Every moment felt heavy, like my skin carried an invisible weight I couldn't shake. People talk about betrayal as a sharp knife, a sudden stab, but for me, it was more like a lingering poison that seeped deeper the longer I sat with it. I wanted closure, but instead I was left with fragments, half-truths, broken promises, and questions that nobody seemed eager to answer. I thought I was done with them both, but life doesn't tie things up so neatly. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just end with the confrontation. It ripples outward, infecting everything else. My family got involved, mutual friends picked sides, and whispers spread in ways I couldn't control. Everywhere I turned, I felt eyes on me, silently judging. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I stumbled onto the one truth I wasn't prepared for. The message that changed everything. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was at home, curled up on the couch with a half-empty cup of coffee, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. My emotions have been swinging wildly. Some days I felt numb. Other days I was furious, and occasionally I'd find myself missing Ethan in ways that made me hate myself. That's when a message popped up on my Instagram. It was from someone I didn't know, a girl named Hannah. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was spam. But then I noticed the preview text. I don't know you, but I think you deserve to know the truth about Ethan and Rachel. My chest tightened as I opened the message. Hannah explained that she worked with Ethan and had been at a few of the same parties Rachel had attended. According to her, what I'd uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Ethan and Rachel hadn't just slipped up once, or even a few times. They'd been carrying on behind my back for over a year. A year. That meant almost the entire time I thought my relationship with Ethan was stable. He'd been balancing two worlds. One with me, one with her. Hannah even included screenshots of group chats, pictures from nights out, and blurry snaps of the two of them together. My hands shook as I scrolled, my vision tunneling until all I could see was their smiling faces pressed close together in photos that looked way too intimate to be innocent. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken lapse of judgment. It wasn't just emotional. It was an affair, planned, repeated, and deliberate. Confrontation, round 2. I thought I had no reason to ever see Ethan again, but after reading Hannah's messages, I realized I couldn't let it go without confronting him one last time. I texted him, "We need to talk. Tonight. No excuses." He showed up at my apartment, looking like hell, dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt, and this air of guilt that seemed to cling to him. For a fleeting second, I almost pitied him. Almost. When he sat down, I slid my phone across the table with Hannah's screenshots open. He froze. His jaw tightened. His fingers twitched like he wanted to grab the phone, smash it, erase it all, but he didn't. He just sat there, silent. "Tell me," I said, my voice shaking. "How long?" After what felt like forever, he finally spoke. "About a year." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. A year. So basically our entire relationship for the past year has been a lie. He ran a hand through his hair, looking miserable. "It wasn't like that. I love you, God, I still love you, but I got caught up. Rachel and I." "Stop." My voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare try to romanticize this. You lied to me every single day. Every hug, every kiss, every time you said you loved me. You were sleeping with someone else. You made me feel crazy when I sensed something was wrong, didn't you? You gaslit me into believing I was paranoid." He winced, which told me I'd hit the mark. I thought the anger would consume me, but in that moment, something else crept in, clarity. I wasn't going to get the apology I deserved, because no words could fix the damage. I wasn't going to get the closure I wanted, because closure doesn't come from liars. The only thing I could do was walk away. Rachel's final move. But of course, Rachel wasn't done either. A week later, I got a text from her. "You think you know everything, but you don't. Ethan always loved me more than you. He told me I was the one he wished he'd chosen. You were just comfortable. The Omi might have spiraled. But after everything, I didn't take the bait." I just stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. Because here's the thing, maybe Ethan did love her more. Maybe I was just convenient, a safe fallback, the steady one while she was the thrill. But that didn't make me the loser. It made me the one who got out. Picking up the pieces. Healing wasn't instant. Some nights I cried myself to sleep. Some mornings I woke up wishing it was all a bad dream. And sometimes, when I least expected it, I'd hear a song or pass a place we used to go together and feel the weight of it all come crashing down again. But slowly, painfully, I rebuilt. I leaned on my friends who stayed by me. I took up journaling, pouring every raw thought onto paper. I even started therapy where I unpacked not just the betrayal, but the way I'd been conditioned to doubt myself in the relationship. And little by little, I realized something important. Ethan and Rachel's actions weren't a reflection of my worth. They were a reflection of theirs. The ending they didn't expect. Months later, I heard through the grapevine that Ethan and Rachel didn't last. Apparently, once the thrill of sneaking around was gone, they crumbled under the weight of their own guilt and dysfunction. When I found out, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel happy. I just felt free. Because by then, I didn't need them to fail for me to feel like I'd won. My victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in the fact that I'd survived what they did to me and come out stronger. I wasn't the asshole for walking away. I wasn't the asshole for demanding better. The real assholes were the ones who thought I deserved less. And now, I'm finally done letting them live rent-free in my head. If you've been through betrayal like this, you know how heavy it can feel, but you also know how powerful it is to come out the other side stronger. If you want more stories like this, make sure you hit subscribe. You won't want to miss the next one. The story begins with me sitting in my bedroom, staring at the half-written vows I've been working on for hours, and wondering how my wedding, something that was supposed to be one of the happiest milestones of my life, had turned into a battlefield. If you had told me a year ago that my own brother and his fiancée would nearly hijack my wedding, I would have laughed and told you that's way too much drama even for a reality TV show. But here we are, and I can't help but wonder if I'm truly the asshole for how I handled it. Let me start from the beginning, because context matters here. I'm 28, and my fiancé, now husband, thank God, is 30. We've been together for 5 years and got engaged last summer. From the moment he proposed, I was excited, but also nervous because weddings have a way of turning even the calmest family into chaos. I come from a pretty tight-knit family, or at least that's what I thought. My parents are divorced, but they're cordial, and my younger brother, let's call him Jason, has always been someone I considered one of my closest friends despite the usual sibling squabbles. Jason is 26, and he started dating his fiancée, Emily, about 2 years ago. She's, how do I put this nicely? She's the kind of person who thrives on attention. She's beautiful, charismatic, and knows exactly how to work a room. At first, I liked her well enough. She was bubbly, fun, and seemed genuinely into my brother. But as time went on, I started to notice how everything had to revolve around her. Family dinners somehow turned into Emily's latest accomplishments. Birthday parties? She managed to slide herself into the spotlight. It wasn't malicious at first, but it definitely grated on me. When we announced our engagement, Jason and Emily were the first ones to congratulate us. Emily squealed, hugged me, and said, "Oh my God, weddings are my thing. I'm going to help you plan every detail." I laughed awkwardly, not realizing just how serious she was. Over the next few months, Emily inserted herself into every aspect of my wedding planning. She'd send me Pinterest boards with color schemes that had nothing to do with what I wanted. She suggested vendors, most of whom were her friends or acquaintances. At one point, she even suggested that she should be my maid of honor, which, like, excuse me, I already had my best friend from college, Sarah, in that role. It wasn't just suggestions, though. She started showing up uninvited to dress fittings, venue tours, and even my bridal shower planning sessions. At first, I tried to be gracious. I told myself she was just enthusiastic, that she loved weddings, and that she probably meant well. But it slowly started to feel like my wedding was becoming her project. The breaking point didn't happen until a few weeks before the actual ceremony. That's when I found out, completely by accident, that Emily and Jason had been meeting with my wedding planner behind my back. Apparently, Emily had convinced Jason that some of my choices were tacky or not Instagram worthy, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. They had gone behind my back to try and swap out the flower arrangements I'd picked for ones Emily preferred. They also tried to change the seating chart to prioritize some of her friends over mine. When I confronted Jason about it, he acted like I was overreacting. Just has a better eye for this stuff, he said. She just wants the day to be perfect. I asked him whose day it was, mine or hers, and he rolled his eyes like I was being selfish. That fight ended with me in tears, my fiancé furious, and Jason refusing to apologize. I thought that was bad enough, but then came the ultimate betrayal. 2 days before the wedding, Emily pulled me aside with this smug little smile and said, "I hope you don't mind, but Jason and I are going to use the reception to announce our engagement. We thought it would be the perfect time since the whole family will already be together." I stared at her in disbelief. I honestly thought she was joking, but no, she was dead serious. She had even gone as far as ordering a cake topper that said she said yes and planned to have it brought out during the reception. I told her absolutely not, that this was my wedding and she had no right to steal the spotlight. She pouted, crossed her arms, and said I was being selfish for not wanting to share the day. That night, I broke down and told my fiancé everything. He was livid. "This is our wedding," he said. "If your brother and his fiancé can't respect that, they don't belong there." The next morning, I called Jason. I told him calmly but firmly that if Emily even tried to announce their engagement at my wedding, they would both be asked to leave immediately. Jason blew up at me, calling me controlling, jealous, and accusing me of trying to ruin his happiness. He said Emily had every right to share her joy and that I should be honored they wanted to do it at my wedding. I told him point blank, "If you try it, you're out. Both of you." Fast forward to the wedding day. Everything was beautiful. For a few hours, I actually forgot all the drama. I walked down the aisle, married the love of my life, and felt on top of the world. But then, during the reception, I noticed Emily whispering to Jason and gesturing toward the DJ. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Before she could make her way to the microphone, I intercepted her. I told her flat out that if she even touched that mic, she and Jason were done for the night. She gave me this shocked, offended look like I was being completely unreasonable, and then stomped back to their table. Jason sulked the rest of the night, and sure enough, they both left early. A few days later, he blew up on social media, calling me a bridezilla and saying I had humiliated him and Emily. Some family members are on his side, saying I could have just let them have their moment and it wouldn't have been a big deal. Others are backing me up, saying it was incredibly disrespectful of them to even try. Now, Jason isn't speaking to me. Emily blocked me on everything, and my parents are begging me to apologize just to keep the peace. But I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I didn't kick them out, but I sure as hell was ready to if they crossed the line. And part of me wishes I had, because maybe that would have sent the message even clearer. So here I am, wondering, am I the asshole for standing my ground and refusing to let my brother and his fiancée hijack my wedding? I couldn't sleep that night. Even though the house was quiet and dark, my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the argument with my brother, his voice dripping with anger, the way his hands clenched at his sides like he was holding himself back from saying even worse things. When the morning came, I felt exhausted, but I forced myself up. My mom was already in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, staring out the window. She didn't turn to greet me like she normally did. "Morning," I muttered. She hummed, but didn't look at me. The air was heavy. It wasn't just about what happened last night. It was everything that had been building up for years. The resentment, the favoritism, the unspoken rules about who was supposed to carry the weight in this family. I poured myself some coffee and sat down across from her. "You're mad at me," I said. Her eyes flicked toward me for a second, then back to the window. "I'm disappointed." That word stung more than anything else. Disappointed? For what? For standing up for myself? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but the frustration I had been bottling up couldn't be contained. She set her mug down slowly. "You know your brother has been struggling. You didn't have to throw everything in his face like that." I leaned forward. "And what about me? Have you noticed that I've been struggling too? Or does it not matter because I'm the one who always figures it out?" I'm the one who always cleans up after him, who covers for him, who takes on the responsibility so he doesn't have to. Her silence was deafening. You act like it's nothing. I continued, my voice cracking now, like I'm supposed to carry it without complaint. But I'm drowning too, and when I finally say something, I'm the asshole. She looked at me then, and for the first time I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You could have handled it differently, she said softly. I laughed bitterly. Yeah, sure. I could have kept my mouth shut like always. Is that what you mean? She didn't answer. That was the problem. She never answered. She never defended me, never told my brother to step up, never acknowledged how unfair it all was. She just let it fester. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I'm done being quiet, and I walked out. Work was no escape. All day, I felt my phone buzzing in my pocket, texts from my brother, from my mom. I ignored them all. I knew if I opened even one, I'd spiral. But when I got home that evening, I couldn't avoid it. My brother was waiting for me on the porch. Can we talk? He asked. I crossed my arms. About what? About how I ruined your night. About how I'm selfish. Go ahead, let's hear it. He looked down at his shoes, his jaw tight. Look, I said some shit last night I shouldn't have. But you don't get it. You don't get what it's like to feel like you're constantly failing. My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to scream at him. Another part wanted to understand. I don't get it, I said quietly. I've been holding this family together while you're off doing whatever you want. And you think I don't know what failure feels like? I feel like I'm failing every single day. Failing at being a good sibling. Failing at being a good kid. Failing at keeping everyone happy. His head shot up at that, his eyes flashing. You think I'm happy? You think I don't lie awake at night wishing I was better? Wishing I was you. That stopped me cold. Wishing you were me. I repeated. He nodded, his throat bobbing like he was swallowing backwards. Yeah, you're the one everyone counts on. You're the one people actually respect. I'm a fuck up. I'm the disappointment. I didn't know what to say. For years, I had carried this resentment, convinced he didn't care, convinced he didn't see what I went through. And now here he was, telling me he envied me. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't erase the unfairness. But for the first time, I realized this wasn't just black and white. Then why don't you try? I asked softly. Why don't you try to be better instead of waiting for me to pick up the slack? His shoulders slumped. Because every time I try, I mess it up. And then Mom looks at me like I broke her heart again. And you look at me like I'm pathetic. And I can't take it. I sighed and sank down onto the porch steps. After a moment, he sat beside me. We stared out at the street, silent, the weight of everything hanging between us. I don't hate you, I whispered. I don't hate you either, he replied. But forgiveness wasn't that easy. The days that followed were tense. My mom still avoided talking about it. My brother tried. He made small efforts, like helping with chores or not snapping when I asked him to do something. But the cracks in our relationship were deep, and every little thing threatened to reopen them. At night, I lay in bed wondering if I had been too harsh or not harsh enough. If standing up for myself had made me the asshole, or if letting it all slide for years had been the real mistake. The truth was I didn't know, and that uncertainty haunted me more than anything else. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the silence. My phone, which I had left on a nightstand, was buzzing with notifications, but the house itself was still. No sound of my mom moving around the kitchen, no noise from the TV that my stepdad usually had on. It was eerie, like the house had decided to hold its breath. I dragged myself out of bed, still exhausted from the emotional fallout of the night before. My eyes burned from the crying, and my throat was raw. When I finally picked up my phone, I saw messages from Lily, my stepsister, the girl who had been caught up in all of this against her will. Hey, I didn't know things were going to blow up like that. I'm so sorry. I can't believe they treated you like that. I'm not mad at you. Please don't hate me. I stared at the messages for a long time, feeling that tug of conflicted loyalty. She wasn't at fault for what my mom and stepdad had done, but she was still tangled in the mess. And the truth was, I didn't hate her. I hated them. I typed back slowly, I don't hate you, but I need space. They crossed the line. She responded almost immediately. I get it. I'll back off. But just know I'm here if you want to talk. For some reason, that made me want to cry again. But instead of falling back into the pit, I pushed myself to get dressed. I had a decision to make. Last night I told them I might leave, and deep down, I knew that wasn't just talk. The problem was, I didn't exactly have a plan. My dad lived 2 states away with his new wife, and while we weren't super close, he always told me his door was open. Maybe now was the time to test that. By mid-morning, I finally emerged from my room. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, her eyes swollen and red. She looked like she hadn't slept either. My stepdad wasn't there, which was probably for the best. She looked up at me cautiously. "Do you want some breakfast?" she asked softly, like she was afraid I'd bite her head off. I shook my head. "No, I'm not hungry." The silence stretched between us. I could feel her trying to figure out what to say, and part of me almost wanted her to apologize, to admit that she had crossed a boundary no mother should ever cross. But instead, she just sighed and said, "I didn't mean to make you feel like you don't belong here. That broke something in me." "That's exactly what you did." I snapped. "You took a private conversation and threw it at me like a weapon. Do you realize how humiliating that was? You didn't just break my trust. You made me feel like I'm disposable in this family. Like I don't matter compared to him and her." Her eyes filled with tears again. "You do matter," she whispered. "Then why don't you act like it?" I shot back. "Why do you always side with him? Why do you act like I'm some burden instead of your child?" She flinched at that, and for a second, I thought maybe I had gotten through to her. But then she said something that made my stomach drop. "You're old enough to handle this. You're almost an adult. Sometimes you have to accept that life isn't fair and that not everything is about you." I just stood there stunned. How could she twist this into me being selfish? "You don't get it," I said, my voice breaking. "This isn't about me wanting everything to be about me. This is about basic respect, and you don't give me any." I didn't wait for her to answer. I turned and went back to my room, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. For the rest of the day, I barely came out. I scrolled endlessly through my phone, searching for apartments, bus tickets, anything that could help me escape. It was reckless, maybe even stupid, but my brain was stuck on one loop. I can't stay here anymore. Around the afternoon, Lily knocked on my door. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. I debated ignoring her, but then I sighed and said, "Yeah." She slipped inside, holding a small plate with a sandwich on it. "You didn't eat all day. I thought you might want this." I didn't even realize how hungry I was until I saw it. "Thanks," I muttered, taking it from her. She sat down on the edge of my bed, her expression heavy. "I don't know how to fix this. I hate that I'm the reason they're fighting with you." "You're not the reason," I said, chewing. "They are. They're the ones who treated me like crap." She nodded slowly, picking at her nails. "I wish I could change things, but I don't want to lose you as my sister." That hit me hard, because despite everything, she was my sister. Maybe not by blood, but by years of shared inside jokes, late night talks, and small moments no one else understood. I didn't want to lose her either. "You won't," I said finally. "But I can't stay here if it means being treated like trash. I deserve better than that." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't argue. She just whispered, "I know." That night, after everyone went to bed, I packed a small bag. Just enough clothes and essentials to last a week. My hands shook as I shoved everything inside, but once the bag was zipped, I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't bluffing anymore. I was leaving. Before I shut off my phone, I sent one last message to my dad. "Can I come stay with you for a while? Things here are bad. I don't feel safe." I didn't know what his answer would be, but for the first time in days, I felt a tiny spark of hope. When I pulled into my driveway that Thursday evening, my stomach was already in knots. I had been replaying the events of the past few weeks in my head, trying to figure out if I had somehow missed a warning sign, a clue, or anything that could have prepared me for the disaster unraveling around me. My relationship, my friendships, even the way my family looked at me, it all felt different, fractured, unstable. The house was quiet when I walked inside, except for the faint hum of the fridge. No TV, no music, no sounds of life that usually made the space feel like home. Just emptiness. I set my keys down on the counter and exhaled a shaky breath. And then I saw it. A folded piece of paper on the kitchen island with my name scrawled across it in hurried handwriting. I froze. I already knew it was from her, Laura, my girlfriend of nearly 6 years. The person who had promised me we were building a future together. My pulse spiked as I reached for the paper, my fingers trembling like I was touching something radioactive. I unfolded the note and read, "I need space. Don't call me tonight. Don't come looking. I'll explain when I'm ready. Please respect this." My throat closed. My first instinct was to grab my phone and call her anyway, but something about the way the words were written, urgent, desperate, made me stop. She had never left a note before. She had never avoided me like this. And suddenly, memories of the hushed phone calls, the late nights at work, the secretive smiles when she thought I wasn't looking, they all started flashing in my mind. I set the note down and leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. I felt sick. For the next 2 hours, I paced the house like a caged animal. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her to text, waiting for some explanation, but nothing came. My anxiety spiraled into anger, then fear, then back to anger. Finally, around 11 p.m., headlights swept across the living room window. My heart leapt into my throat as I peered out through the blinds. It was her car. Laura walked up the path slowly, her shoulders hunched, her hands buried in her jacket pockets. When she stepped inside, she wouldn't even look at me. "Where were you?" I demanded, my voice already shaking with a mix of fury and panic. She sighed, dropping her bag onto the floor like it weighed 100 pounds. "I told you, I needed space." "Space?" I laughed bitterly. "That's your excuse? You disappear, leave me some cryptic note, and then just stroll back in here like nothing's wrong?" She flinched but still wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when it hit me. She was guilty of something. "Who were you with?" I asked quietly, though my chest was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack. Her silence said more than words ever could. I stepped closer. "Laura, look me in the eye and tell me you weren't with him." Her head jerked up, her expression full of shock. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly who I'm talking about," I snapped. "Chris." The name hung heavy in the room. Chris, her co-worker. The one she always swore was just a friend. The one she texted at midnight, claiming it was about some stupid project deadline. The one who always seemed just a little too comfortable touching her arm, making her laugh. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And that silence broke me more than any confession ever could. I stumbled back, my chest tight. "Oh my God, it's true." Finally, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The room spun. I felt like the floor had just given out beneath me. "You've been cheating on me." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. It started with work. We were both stressed, and he understood me. "You were so distant, so focused on your own stuff." "Don't you dare blame this on me," I spat. My voice cracked raw. "I gave you everything, Laura. 6 years, and you throw it away for some office fling." She crumpled onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" I laughed bitterly, my chest aching. "You think hiding it didn't hurt? You think lying every single day didn't hurt?" I couldn't stand to look at her. I stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My whole body was trembling with rage and grief. For hours, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship like a sick montage. Every kiss, every promise, every "I love you" felt poison now. By the time the sun came up, I had made my decision. She had to go. I walked back into the living room, where she was sitting in the same spot, her face puffy from crying. I didn't even bother softening my voice. "Pack your things. You're leaving today." She shot up, her eyes wide. "Wait, please, can we just talk about this? Don't throw it all away." "You already threw it away," I said coldly. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled back like her touch was fire. "Don't," I warned. "Just don't." She sobbed as she gathered her stuff, moving through the house like a ghost. I watched from the doorway, numb, as the woman I thought I would marry stuffed our life together into bags and boxes. When she finally carried the last suitcase out the door, she turned back to me one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't answer. I just closed the door, and the silence that followed was deafening. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because just when I thought I had taken back control, just when I thought the worst was behind me, Chris himself decided to show up at my door. And what he had to say made everything so much worse. When a morning light filtered through the blinds, it fell across my face like it was trying to drag me out of the haze I had fallen into. My head felt heavy, not from sleep, but from the storm of thoughts that had kept me awake all night. I had tossed and turned, rehearsing conversations that never happened, arguments that never took place, and apologies that I doubted I would ever receive. I got up slower than usual, each movement deliberate, as if my body was reluctant to start another day of conflict. I walked into the kitchen, expecting silence, but instead, I found my brother already there. He was leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee in his hand, his posture casual, like he didn't have a care in the world. For a second, I thought maybe today would be different. Maybe he'd look up and say something like, "I've been thinking, maybe I was wrong." But no, he glanced at me, barely acknowledging my presence, and then went back to scrolling on his phone. That was it. I poured myself some coffee, the clinking of the spoon against the mug, the only sound filling the silence between us. My mind kept circling back to everything that had led us here. The late-night fights, the accusations, the betrayal that never seemed to let go. Finally, I said, "We can't keep going like this." He looked up, his expression bored, almost irritated that I dared to interrupt his peaceful morning. "Going like what?" he asked, his tone dripping with indifference. "You know exactly what I mean," I replied. My voice was calm, steadier than I felt inside. The constant fights, the ignoring each other, pretending nothing's wrong when everything is wrong. We're tearing this family apart. He snorted, a dry laugh that carried no humor. "Don't make it sound so dramatic. Families fight. It's normal." "Not like this," I shot back, finally letting some of the frustration slip into my words. "This isn't normal. This is toxic. And it's not just between us. It's affecting Mom, Dad, everyone." That was when his mask slipped just a little. His jaw tightened, his grip on his coffee mug firmed. But instead of agreeing, instead of admitting even a sliver of guilt, he shook his head. "You always play the victim," he said. "You always make it sound like you're the one carrying the weight of the world while I'm the villain. Maybe if you stopped acting so self-righteous, we wouldn't be here." Those words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't that they were true, they weren't, but because he truly believed them. He had built this narrative in his head where I was the unreasonable one, the manipulative one, the asshole in this story. I set my mug down carefully, trying to control the tremor in my hand. "If that's what you want to believe, fine. But don't think for a second that I'll keep letting you walk all over me just because we share blood." That excuse ran out a long time ago. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressing into a thin line. For a second, I thought he might lash out again like he had before. Sharp words, sharper accusations. But instead he muttered, "You've changed. You used to let things go. You used to not care so much." "I had to change," I said, meeting his stare. "Because if I didn't, I'd still be trapped in the same cycle, waiting for you to respect me, waiting for you to treat me like I mattered. I'm done waiting." The silence that followed was louder than any screaming match we'd ever had. It pressed down on the kitchen walls, making the air thick and unbreathable. He looked away first, back down at his phone, as if the conversation had been nothing more than background noise. But I knew it had landed. Somewhere deep inside, it had struck a nerve. He could pretend all he wanted, but I had seen the flicker of realization in his eyes, even if he buried it quickly under indifference. Later that day, when I was in my room, I overheard him talking to Mom. His voice was quieter than usual, almost uncertain. He didn't know I was listening, but I caught fragments of it. "Maybe I pushed too far," he said. "I don't know. He makes me feel like everything I do is wrong." Hearing that stung, because it twisted reality. I wasn't trying to make him feel wrong. I was just trying to get him to see what he'd done, to acknowledge the pain he caused. But even now, even when he was admitting something close to regret, he painted himself as the misunderstood one. It made me realize something. I might never get the closure I wanted. I might never hear the words, "I was wrong. I'm sorry." And maybe that had to be okay. Maybe closure wasn't about hearing an apology. Maybe it was about deciding I didn't need one anymore. That his refusal to take responsibility didn't define me or my worth. That I could still move forward, even if he stayed stuck. That night, As I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, I made myself a quiet promise. I wouldn't let him drag me down anymore. I wouldn't keep fighting for validation he wasn't capable of giving. Because at the end of the day, the real question wasn't was I the asshole? The real question was, did I finally have the strength to stop caring if he thought I was? And for the first time in a long time, the answer felt like yes. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful and emotional stories are coming your way, and you won't want to miss them.